And welcome into Hoopsville. If you happen to know, we're on the air. We are on the air. Welcome in. I hope you're enjoying the fact that we have now selected the teams to the NCAA Championship Tournament. I am your suited-up host, Dave McHugh. If you got questions for us, tweet us at D3Hoops or hashtag Hoopsville. Email me, hoopsville at d3hoops.com, or join us on Facebook at facebook.com/Hoopsville. Momentary, a special Hoopsville, as I type, edition is on the air answering your questions about the D3 men's and women's tournaments. Watch. Sorry, got to do things multitasking here because that's how we roll on a busy Monday, and especially when you've spent as much time in this studio as I have in the last few days. But we are on the air nonetheless. If you got questions, again, email us, hoopsville at d3hoops.com. Join us on Facebook at facebook.com/Hoopsville. You can join us in many other capacities as well. Of course, email, Facebook, Twitter. We mention them. You join us. We'll answer your questions. The men's and women's brackets are out. They are official. I have them here with all my scribbles. More scribbles on some than others. We've already talked to the committee chairs in a rare opportunity to have a conference call with them earlier today. We will talk to them live here on the show. If schedule allows, we'll talk here for about 30 minutes before Dave Martin will join us on the women's side. And then we will have Jeff Burns join us a little bit later. Coleman will be joining me momentarily, and so on and so forth. Again, email us, hoopsville at d3hoops.com. Join us on Facebook at facebook.com/Hoopsville, or, of course, join us on, you can join us on Twitter at D3Hoopsville or hashtag Hoopsville. I believe my counterpart, crime, and whatever you want to call him, is available, so we'll bring in the esteemed Pat Coleman. Mr. Coleman, how are you, sir? I see you suited up as well.
Well, it just seemed like an appropriate...
Well, we don't have much audio from you. Can you boost your audio, sir?
I could probably do that.
No, it's a little low. We'll work on it. Maybe it's just me. Hold on.
Okay.
No, it's just me. Go ahead. You're fine.
All right. So basically what we oh wow, I probably overcompensated there. I wanted to match the tone here. This is a big day. Selection Sunday is or Monday is a big day. And I have to say, kind of maybe a little bit inspired by our friend Justin Sweeney, who covered the D3Hoops.com Classic with us. He's suited up for these games in Las Vegas that we broadcast, and his team, they were just treated like they're the number one seed in the entire country, Dave. They had a team from a automatic qualifier from one of the lower conferences in Division III flying all the way across the country to meet them. So I just, I felt inspired by what I saw in the bracket.
I'm with you. I'm with you, mainly because I was wearing one anyway.
Yeah,
but I kept it on. I think that's important. I kept the tie and jacket in their place.
Please, I would have keep your clothes on. Thank you. Yeah. So I got my bracket here, and then I have another one somewhere buried under a laptop. But we have a couple of interesting brackets. I certainly like the men's bracket better, but the women's bracket is pretty good too. So there's not a whole lot to complain about, and especially since we got all 18 of the or 19 of the at-large bids right on the men's side, then there's literally almost nothing we could complain about, right?
Yeah, and I guess if we're going to get all 19, we can't complain about who's in and who's not in.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm sorry. On retrospect,
this show's over.
I no longer think WPI should.
You contrarian. Oh, we got a little bit of breakup on the signal. We'll see if it bounces back here. Mr. Coleman. Oh, little freeze job. Oh, we lost him. We'll see if that'll come back. See, that's what happens. I hear you. We don't see you, Mr. Coleman. We'll wait to see if that pops back in. I guess that's what happens when you decide you're going to go contrarian and disagree with the committee. Apparently, they have groups that will take you off the air. So good to know before we talk to the committee chairs later, huh? Still can see Pat or hear, but not see. He'll be joining us here momentarily. Again, if you got questions for us, tweet us at D3Hoopsville, hashtag Hoopsville. Email us, hoopsville at d3hoops.com, or join us on Facebook. Facebook.com/Hoopsville. Lots of ways you can interact with us. We'll try and answer your questions on the same time. We will be able to talk to the committee chairs and get your questions answered there as well. We certainly open up any opportunities we can have here. Yes, even Rusty Egan noticed that you're cut off once you mention that WPI should not be in. Pat kind of, it ended Pat's appearance on the show, apparently. He's working on that. Hopefully we'll get him back here momentarily. Quick initial reactions when I got the brackets. Rusty, engineers at work against Pat. My initial reactions after I got the brackets, I kind of liked what I saw on the men's side, and I liked what I saw on the women's side. I really had no qualms as Pat Coleman now joins us. By the way, Pat, we believe our theory is that WPI's engineers heard your little slight and went enough.
I suppose that's possible. They would be like the MIT folks who stuffed the ballot box on one of our polls a couple years ago, or of course some of the famous things that Caltech has done in Southern California around athletic events. So it's always possible.
Yeah, I think it was possible. I think we got that one in. But hey, I was just saying when I initially saw the brackets at varying times today, initially my reaction has been they both positive. Yes, we can always tweak them. We could always find ways that we could improve them. And I think even the committees would admit they'd like to improve things too at times. But overall, I certainly didn't have anything that jumped out at me and went, oh, that's just horrible, or gosh, I wish they would change that. I thought for both brackets overall, pretty decent and well spread out when they could.
Well, and Dave, let me tell you too something. When we talked last night about how to present the brackets on the air, right? The women's bracket is like the perfect combination of both of all the drama stuff we were talking about, right? The very first pairing out of the gate is just a mind-blowing thing that you would never see in Division III. Never think that you would send somebody from Pennsylvania all the way out to Oregon for a first round game. But because there were only 2 teams in the Northwest who made the tournament and one team was flying in from Southern California, you could, as we have said for many years, right, Dave, you could fly that other team from anywhere.
Yeah, you really could.
It was nice that they chose somebody from completely out of nowhere to do that with. And then to hold the last at-large team until the very last name that's called. That's good. I mean, the producer and you should have been really happy with that.
I did see that and decided they didn't need any notes from me. I saw Bethel hiding in the corner and went, oh, no, that'll breed well. Of course, especially the Northwest Conference people going, where's Whitworth? Where's Whitworth? I'm like, well, A, you're not going to find them, but B, you're going to have to wait till the very last team to find out. And, of course, the other team that we thought was going to be in that was Chicago. And I'll answer this now, and Dave Martin will probably say it later. It came down to a battle between strengths of schedule versus how many wins do you have. And let's be honest, Whitworth only played 20 games in Division III and won 15 of those, and you're playing with a bit of you're more on a high wire there when you try and pull that off, because simply put, you're asking yourself to lose less if you're going to play less. And I think that's what Whitworth got into. And I think another example was Chicago. As much as they had a good season, they also had a couple losses in there that weren't good. Interesting note that I think we should keep in mind too is when we look at McDaniel's strength of schedule, not great. They were 24-3, and basically it came down to 24 wins is 24 wins. But if you think about it now, Muhlenberg actually winning the automatic qualifier there actually gives them a good win against regionally ranked opponents, and it doesn't give them too bad a losses because at least Muhlenberg's in the equation versus some other teams.
Muhlenberg was in the equation already, though. Muhlenberg was regionally ranked before. They were in the conversation we had last night. I didn't see that. I didn't see any kind of sea change that would change what we thought about McDaniel last night. But yeah, I mean, eventually some committee is going to. We talked about this with the men's bracket too. Some committee's going to someone's going to have to make a call about whether it's strength of schedule or where it's winning percentage. And if you don't have both and you only have one, then the committee's going to have to choose one or the other. And that's just what it is. There's nothing much more that can be said about that. They chose the 24-3 team, and it's hard not to choose a 24-3 team that plays at least in a representative conference. And the Centennial is certainly a representative conference.
Yeah. So. McDaniel, I think, was one of the early surprises on the women's side. About a third of the way in, everyone got that little nugget of information. They'll take on Stockton. Of course, the other one that was that nugget was the Bethel one. Of course, that was at the very end. So nice little tease along the way, as it were. Listen, we'll stick with the women's just so I can get a couple more notes out. Obviously, George Fox was going to host Puget Sound. Flying out of there just isn't going to happen, not when they have to already fly in somebody to that pod, along with Claremont Mudd Scripps. If you fly Puget Sound out, now you're talking 3 flights. It's not going to those who balance the numbers at the NCAA are not going to allow that as much as you'd like to have it. Honestly, we'll hear this from Dave Martin most likely, but Rhodes winning did a combination of things. Rhodes winning allowed the Texas bracket to take form, but it also restricted some creativity possibly because you fill out the grouping automatically there, whereas maybe you're forced into an extra flight and can get into some more creativity on the bracket. So Rhodes winning was both a blessing and a curse maybe to the national committee, and of course that's all takes place in that upper left-hand corner.
And Dave, we felt the same thing when Ryan Scott and I were putting together this men's bracket that we projected last night. And you have 2 brackets or 2 pods of 4 that are completely locked in. You know, those pods of 4, the one for the men that's at East Texas Baptist and the one that's in Emory, those 8 teams were only going to play in those 2 pods. We couldn't put them anywhere else, which meant that we had basically no hosting opportunities for anybody in the West. Teams such as LaGrange, who could have driven out to somewhere else in the central region or the Great Lakes, Spalding, who could have driven out to someone in a lot of regions, they were forced to be in those pods. And similarly, you take a bunch of teams off the board where you have no place else that you can put them, and it does make the job a little bit harder for the committee or anybody else who's trying to put together a projected bracket as well.
Someone took exception in my saying I didn't have any major qualms with this tournament, pointing out that Regis is heading back to Montclair where they played 2 years already. I get it. So we got one game we don't like.
So Dave, the men talked about that. You mentioned that to me off the air last night, that they try to avoid sending the same team to the same team over and over and over. Regis hasn't merited to the ability to play anybody else. It would be nice for them to play somebody else. I think maybe we had, I don't know where we had put them. I know I had put Pine Manor at Tufts because that seemed excessively appropriate. But Regis is going to have to go somewhere. They're going to go to a top seed because because they might dominate the NECC, but that's not going to get them very far. So, I mean, would they had rather have been at FDU Florham this year? Yeah, it's kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other, I suppose. Who do you want to get? Who do you want to get run out of the gym by? But I think that I'm being brutally honest, obviously, but I think that's kind of just the way it goes. If you win a weak conference, you're going to get sent to a top seed. Montclair continues to be a top seed. Regis continues to be a bottom seed. It would be nice if they thought those things over and weren't so repetitive, but I don't think it's another matchup for Regis wouldn't have been better. They could have played Tufts. They could have played FDU Florham, but the result wasn't going to change.
And they have to move some teams around. I mean, again, 1 out of 32 games. I'm not going to been out of shape about. Could Regis have gone somewhere else? Of course.
Sure. Lots of these teams could have gone somewhere else.
But a lot of teams, And I mean, at some point you got to stop doing it. I did hear that the women's committee finished about 1:30 in the morning. Compare that to the men's committee, who finished about 9:30 in the evening. Men's committee did get an earlier start, though, also due in part to the fact that men's games on Sunday ended sooner than women's games on Sunday.
That's true. Yep.
And so that certainly would play a role there. But yeah, I mean, okay, so Regis doesn't go to Montclair, then they're going to either Bowdoin, they're going to maybe Salisbury, or they're going to NYU. Or you go to the other side. You're right, FDU Florida. But then you're starting to say, okay, if they're not going to go, who else goes? And you start flipping around things. And so, listen, does Regis not need to go to Montclair? Say, fine, maybe not. But you know what? All in all, I have no problem with it.
Yeah, I think if we start getting down to the point where we're rearranging 15 seeds and 16 seeds, which is basically what those teams would be that we're talking about, it's not a big enough deal to go to the mat for. We can certainly talk to Dave about it when he gets on the show, and we can try to urge them to have a little bit more creativity and not just paste Regis into the line below Montclair State every year. But that's not a huge deal compared to some other things that have been around in previous years. And I think this bracket is pretty good. Maybe the show is over, Dave. I don't know.
All right, we're done. Thank you, everybody. Good night. If you've got any questions for us, tweet us at D3Hoops or hashtag Hoopsville. Email us hoopsville@d3hoops.com or join us on Facebook at facebook.com/Hoopsville. For women, does McDaniel and Bethel being in the field, meaning winning percentage, more emphasized than SOS? No, not necessarily. It just meant when it came down to it that the winning percentages for those two teams were certainly being recognized despite their SOSs. Let's be honest. Let's take Bethel versus Whitworth just because it's off the top of my head. Bethel's 21-6, and Whitworth
and 21-5 versus D3, and 15-5.
25. Thank you, and 15-5 for Whitworth. Well, that's 6 more wins. When you only play 20 games, that's risky.
Right.
And so at some point, the push came to the shove there and went, great. Your SOS is high because you also didn't play as many games. You didn't have as many hits to that SOS, and they played more games and won more games.
Yeah, I
guess that's what it's coming down to.
Yeah, we talked about this on the show last night, right, Dave? Whitworth versus, I remember calling out Eastern Oregon, College of Idaho, Walla Walla. I mean, they played Rutgers Newark, if I remember correctly, and of course the site is slow but loading for me, not crashed. Big day on D3Hoops.com. I would invite you to the D3Hoops.com Classic. Come on down to Las Vegas. We'll get you 2 Division III teams for sure. If you're looking for D3 teams, especially if you're west of, the Ohio-Indiana line, Las Vegas is not that difficult to get to. We'd be glad to have anybody. We've had teams from the Northwest Conference before. They've had a lot of fun. Come on down. We'll get you some games.
Sorry, just finishing a tweet.
But for Whitworth, basically, they lost the opportunity to play some other teams. That's basically the crux of this. They played Southwestern. Southwestern did make the field, but they're 15-12, and that is it. They played Rutgers, Newark, Texas Lutheran, and Southwestern. The only 3 non-conference games that they played against Division III opponents, which means that there were 2/3 of their non-conference schedule was outside of Division III. And if you want to make the Division III tournament, it's certainly helpful to play a Division III schedule.
It was very helpful to play a Division III schedule, and I think that's the game. I mean, Chicago was 16-7, certainly didn't play as many games, but again, 16 losses versus 24 or 21, it becomes a factor. And so at some point, push comes to shove. Some committee member, as we've said, has to make a decision to go, listen, as great as the SOS is, we can't ignore the win-loss. And at the same time, they're having the conversation. As great as the win-loss is, you can't ignore the SOS. I highly suspect Bethel and McDaniel were some of the last ones in. We may or may not find that out later when we talk to Dave Martin. And it's going to come down to tough decisions. And at some point, they're trying to pick the best represented 64 teams that they can, the best 20 at-large teams that they can. Can we hem and haw over a couple? We can always hem and haw over a couple. Just because we were 19 for 19 on the men's side didn't mean we weren't hemming and hawing over the last couple in there as well. I mean, it took, what was it, Bob Quillman to finally break our tie over Catholic? Yeah. So, this is what happens. Does Bethel and St. Olaf get in if they get the regional rankings right? Well, for starters, we don't know what the regional rankings were.
St. Olaf, although we do, we clearly know that Bethel was behind St. Olaf.
Yes, we know Bethel was behind St. Olaf. And that's going to come down to the fact that Bethel's 3 wins over St. Olaf can't trump some of the other problems. Just because Bethel has those 3 wins, let's not forget what their losses are.
They also lost to Carleton, right? They lost to Hamlin. Those are games that it's hard to overlook those, right? So, if we went back and we put Bethel on the board, they had a 19-8 Division III mark, a 564 strength of schedule. If I remember correctly, they would have lost to St. Thomas. They lost to St. Thomas 3 times and beat St. Olaf 3 times. That would be 3-3 against regionally ranked opponents. I think they would be in the conversation, Dave. 18-8 is really low, 19-8 is really low. They would present actually very similarly to Hope. So Bethel 19-8, 564, 3-3. Hope 17-8, 558, 2-6. I think they present very similarly, and Hope didn't get in the field. And when you and I were going through this last night, Dave, Hope was not really a serious contender either.
No, we had kind of eliminated Hope in some capacity, and so. The problem is it's not all about the wins. It's also about the losses. And the committee's going to be conscious that a team doesn't get in because of its losses in the sense of a false SOS or a lot of regionally ranked games. But they're also going to be conscious of the fact that a team doesn't get in just because of one criteria, which happens to point at 3 head-to-head wins. There's other criteria that screams that Bethel shouldn't. So
I'm just looking at
I know Bethel. They beat the Tommies. I get that, but they should have beaten the Tommies when they had the AQ at hand.
Well, yeah, hold on a second here. So they did beat the Tommies 1 out of 3. They lost to Buena Vista by 20. So I think Buena Vista really deserved to be on the table ahead of them. Their other out of conference games, Martin Luther, River Falls. River Falls was in the top 4, I believe, in the WIAC this year, or at least they were in the top 6 because they were definitely in the WIAC tournament. Northwestern, I mentioned Martin Luther, River Falls, and Buena Vista, and they lost to Buena Vista. If they'd beaten Buena Vista, we'd probably be talking about them being in the field. They would be close enough then. They certainly would have been ahead of Buena Vista in the regional rankings based on the head-to-head. Then they would be a 20-win team. They'd be 20-7. Strength of schedule would still be the same. They'd be 4-2 against regionally ranked opponents. They would have been on the table for a while at least before they might have been selected or not selected. But I mean, you lose to Buena Vista head-to-head, and Buena Vista's on the table too. You got to accept that you're going to be behind Buena Vista, and Buena Vista didn't have the numbers to get in.
Yeah, I mean, it becomes circular in some nature, but that's
sure does.
That it can't come down to just one criteria. If they had a couple others, and if they had beaten St. Thomas to get the AQ, we wouldn't be having this conversation at all.
Yep. Like Southern Vermont, right? Bethel had its destiny in its hands.
Yep.
Like North Central, like Franklin and Marshall, all of these teams are sitting on the outside. There's no Pool B. I mean, everybody had a chance at an automatic bid. So, we're talking about the 19 teams who get second chances.
If you got questions for us, tweet us at D3Hoops or hashtag Hoopsville. Email us hoopsville@d3hoops.com or join us on Facebook. Facebook.com/Hoopsville. We'll try and answer your questions as we move along and dive into some things here. Men's and women's brackets. We'll be talking in a few minutes to the women's chair, Dave Martin. I should point out, Pat, we're hoping to do that via Skype, so this could be interesting.
Oh, will we be able to Skype conference?
I don't know.
If not, I'm willing to go out I'm willing to take the telephone instead. And I wouldn't mind having a minute to get something to eat. This is a Selection Monday for me. I have not eaten.
Can you get me something, please?
We could probably have something delivered.
Yeah, thank you. Mary Murg says, Mary Murg. Hi, Mary.
Yeah.
I understand the decision. Just curious when the last time. I'm sorry, I may have missed something.
That's okay. And so what she's asking about, I've already answered. This is a conversation that's ongoing on Twitter. It's why Wisconsin Superior didn't get in. And Superior, 19-7 was their was what was on the board for them. They also lost to Minnesota Duluth, if I remember correctly. And I'm working from memory, but we talked about this on the show last night. Strength of schedule is actually not very good. Remember, this is Superior's last act in the WIAC for basketball altogether. And women's basketball played in the conference title game, the conference final on Sunday afternoon. Lost to Wisconsin Oshkosh. Superior was at the bottom of the regional rankings coming in, and I think deservedly so. 7 losses, and their out-of-conference schedule just wasn't that good. They already started playing some of their future Upper Midwest Athletic Conference foes, and that really dragged down their strength of schedule a little bit. And it just, the fact that they're the WIAC regular season champs, it just means that they're the WIAC regular season champs and they get the top seed in the conference tournament. The automatic bid is all tied on the conference tournament. And remember, Dave, too, some of I think maybe the conference was down a little bit this year too. We certainly know that individually, Whitewater was down, Stevens Point was down, and those are two teams that we tend to focus on because they've been successful before. It's maybe not necessarily indicative of the conference as a whole, but I think there's some evidence to suggest that maybe the WIAC just wasn't quite as good this year in women's basketball.
Yeah, and obviously you said we saw Plattsburgh, we saw Stevens Point, and I talked to Superior's head coach, Coach Mulhern, about that. About the fact that, hey, I've seen these teams in person. This is seeming a little weird, for lack of a better description. And who knows what the real reason was. But, I realized prepping for the UMAC next year, which they will probably be very successful in, didn't help.
You chose interesting words there, Dave. I think you were going to say something else.
I had another one in my mind. I hesitated.
I think they will dominate that league, though.
Yeah, and it didn't help. I mean, the strength of schedule was pretty low, and put them behind some teams in the region. It's unfortunate that way. Unfortunately, I think the last regional rankings going in, we always say, are the tea leaves. You got to understand what you're looking at there. They were sitting 9th of 9 in the regional rankings. That should be a red alert that you have got to go out and win the conference. You cannot be in the middle to bottom of a lot of regional rankings and think you've gotten that large chance. It's just not realistic. And Superior was sitting 9th. red alert should have been going off. We got to go win the AQ. And knowing you didn't, you need to realize there's no way you're jumping for not winning the AQ 9 to something higher to get into the tournament when you got to figure everybody else ahead of you lost too. It doesn't change the equation.
Yeah, and I think, for example, I listened to or watched a good portion of the WIAC tournament championship game yesterday. I'm trying to be very careful not to qualify something as a tournament championship game, because whether a conference considers its regular season winner or the tournament winner as the conference champ is kind of irrelevant to the selection process. So the AQ, the conference final, and the Superior broadcasters seemed very understanding that they were aware that they needed to win to get in. Oshkosh had a decent shot, perhaps, at an at-large if they had lost and Superior had won. But Superior, by losing, they knew pretty well they were not going to get in.
Question regarding the Chicago women says, how does the committee pass up University of Chicago 20-7? Well, first off, they're 18-7. Ties for UAA conference. Yep, that's pretty tough. 4 or 7 losses to the top 10 teams, 5th in strength of schedule, could have gone on to many different brackets. Makes no sense. Well, for starters, they're 18-7 overall,
and they're really 17-7 because Illinois Tech is basically not a Division III school yet.
Yep, doesn't count. So they're 17-7, but they do have losses. A loss to Carthage doesn't help them. A loss to Manchester doesn't help them. Loss to Whitewater did not help them this year. Loss to Wheaton was okay because Wheaton's certainly in. Loss to Hope doesn't hurt, and loss to Wash U doesn't hurt. But you lost to Wash U twice. Yes, your strength of schedule is phenomenal, but this comes down to that question of strength of schedule versus win-loss. At some point, you have to win your games. And at 17-7, 7 losses, especially when you should have beat, let's just argue, for argument's sake, you should have beaten Manchester, should have beaten Carthage. Let's just say you should have beaten Whitewater. That alone would have made you 20-4 in the eyes of the NCAA, and probably would have made you a lock.
If we go back to I'm going to go back to the board for a second here too, just to take a look at if we'd given Chicago just one more win and make them 18-6, the strength of schedule still remains the same at ludicrous height. Who did we select the last couple times around? We selected teams with pretty vanilla strength of schedules, but with better records. I think Chicago needed to win 2 more. I think it's not just one. The Whitewater game for sure. Whitewater proved teams proved they could beat Whitewater this year, and University of Chicago needed to be on that list. So it's not necessarily the any one game in the UAA would have helped as well, but certainly the Whitewater game. I think they needed 2 wins to get in. It's not just a matter of one, leaving them out.
Yeah, and Manchester, Carthage are the 2 that jump out at me there. Or even split with Wash U, though I realize that's tough, but still a split in the win at your place. Mark writes, really surprised Bethel, a shock. Might as well been Superior. Just quickly back, Bethel's got better numbers than Superior anyway, so I don't think you could have made it Superior. Trying to see if we got some other things in here.
I was going to just dive in and see if there was any common opponents or anything we could point to, but I don't know if Superior played MIAC teams. And let me see here. So Superior played McAllister, but that's not going to be a differentiator. A lot of teams, McAllister didn't beat too many contenders this year.
By the way, let's not confuse polls and criteria. Regarding Superior says,
I got to vote in the top 25 yet.
You? If you're better than us, then why aren't they ranked higher in any of the polls? Listen, the NCAA has criteria. Based on the criteria that the NCAA has, which is very not restrictive, but is set, that's where it changes.
Well, and they're ranked in the regional polls. You got to look at the regional polls. And frankly, Dave, I would be perfectly fine if we just not even address some of the questions from people who don't understand. I
know. I was just trying to take advantage of the opportunity to point out that there is the criteria that the NCAA has. As a top 25 voter, I don't have any criteria, essentially. And so you can choose different things. That's like on the men's side, Albertus Magnus or St. Norbert being deeper in the regional rankings than their national rankings. And it's not that surprising. Question coming on the men's side and by the way, a couple more questions, and I got to get to Dave Martin. Does the lower left Babson region seem a little light, especially compared to the two upper regions for the men? No, nothing to me says it's light, because I think there's some sneakily good teams in there. I think Hopkins, we've already said all year, has been pretty darn good. Stockton, he may be finally coming together after some tough spot in the middle of the season. I think Bates is a team that could prove that they're better than what everybody thinks they are. Trinity, Connecticut has certainly proven that they're good. If you go 9-1 through the NESCAC, in a NESCAC that was very challenging in the sense that there were a lot of middle teams, which meant everybody was beating everybody, and you come out of that 9-1, that's nothing to shake a stick at. All intents and purposes, Eastern Connecticut is apparently playing well, and I think Salisbury could turn into a little bit of a sleeper here. They've got a very good squad that's really maybe a year early. They're going to be good next year, especially. I don't think the lower left is especially all that less challenging than others, but then at the same time, geography plays a role here at some point in time. And the top of the bracket, there's a lot they tried to do to avoid some games. They didn't have any choices. And the bottom left, you gotta have them play event somewhere, and you can't ship them wherever you want to ship them.
Well, I think what this person is referring to, and I would agree with them on this point, is it's certainly devoid of name brand programs.
Sure.
Right? But we've seen this year that the name brand programs are not necessarily the ones that are going to get it done, or guaranteed of getting it done anyway. I mean, we've had so many ups and downs in Division III men's basketball this year that it's just nuts. So I mean, if Stockton is the only name brand in this half of the bracket or this quarter of the bracket with Babson, yeah, I mean that's true. That's definitely true. I don't think that. I think Babson has a lot to worry about, though, in all honesty. Nobody in the NUMAC won an NCAA tournament game last year. They went 4-0. 4 teams got in. They all went out in the first round. So I don't think anybody who's a Babson fan can start counting chickens because, the eggs have yet to be laid here.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, we're going to take a break. When we come back, Dave Martin will join us, the women's basketball committee chair. He will discuss the decisions there on the women's side and get your questions answered as well. Hopefully he'll be joining us via Skype. Any final thoughts before we go to him, Pat?
No, try to conference us in. That'll be cool. Let's see where Dave Martin, what it looks like in Indianapolis today.
Yeah. Well, actually, he's in Misericordia, but...
Oh, boring.
Well, technology's changed everything. All right, so we'll go to a break and we'll bring him in. You're listening to Hoopsville, presented by D3Hoops.com, the National Association of Basketball Coaches. Plenty more Hoopsville ahead, and we'll bring in Dave Martin as well. We'll be back with more Hoopsville right after this.
I used to never really talk. Ever. I was scared and shy. It was hard to look at people's faces. I was afraid if I said something wrong, everyone would laugh at me. But then I started to play golf with Special Olympics. I made friends and won lots of gold medals. But I learned more than just playing golf. Special Olympics helped me to find my voice. And now everyone else is speechless.
We've got more schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's 800 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over a decade. From Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the University of New England, and from Hope to Calvin. Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do. We're at D3Hoops.com at www.D3Hoops.com.
Division III allows you to be able to give yourself to other things. Not even just participate in them, but really get involved with them if you want to.
There's a lot of interaction. It's not just sitting back, taking notes. You're actually doing hands-on things and better preparing yourself for your major.
Choosing a Division III school, I've had the opportunity to develop my leadership skills and to be more involved on campus.
Division III in athletics, affords students the opportunity not only to participate, in intercollegiate athletics at a competitive level, but also gives them the opportunity to, engage in the other interests in their campus and in their lives outside of that sport and outside of the academics on the campus.
And to have opportunity to have time to join clubs and being able to play basketball, it allows you to just be able to do everything you want to do. I wouldn't change it for the world.
College basketball lives in Kansas City at the College Basketball Experience at Sprint Center. The
Sure.
College Basketball Experience is the place to get your game on. It's not a museum, it's an experience you won't forget.
Who does these days?
Discover the history of the game in the National Collegiate Basketball Hall of Fame, featuring the Gallery of Honor, Mentor Circle, and Honor Theater. Suit up in the latest CBE logoed Nike gear at the CBE Hoop Shop. Elevate your game today and visit the house that college basketball built.
We've got more
Yeah.
schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's 800 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over a decade.
No, you're
From
fine.
Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the
tired.
University of New England, and from Hope to
A
Calvin.
wee bit.
Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do.
Little
We're
blurred.
D3Hoops.com at
Doesn't know who I am.
www.d3hoops.com.
I know sports is important, but
I will
having
indeed.
the academic part
I will indeed.
along with
Yeah.
it is a big plus.
I do
I've
too. I was just
discovered
talking
in
about those
myself,
games the other day. That was
a
your
newfound
Sinus
ability to
Coast Guard
overcome
thriller.
adversity at all different angles.
Yeah. Hey, 10
At a
seconds here.
Division III
And
school,
I'm going to come
school's
back
really
and then bring
shaped
you in.
around you developing yourself as a complete individual. The end result, in my mind,
Let's see if I can
is
get this.
you just become a very well-rounded person.
Before I came into
All right,
college,
Pat, I
I didn't
can't
really
do
think
both
I'd
at the
be
same
able
time.
to balance so much. It helps a lot that
Yep.
you
Just letting
have
you know.
a family with your
Yeah.
team that can guide you.
With a D3 school, there's a lot of time for other opportunities. The coaches expect a lot of you during
Sorry, I
soccer,
tried to take a
but
call and it
after
didn't work.
soccer, that's your own personal time to really find
Okay,
out
so
who
get
you
ready to
are
stand by, sir.
and other opportunities that you can pursue.
By balancing all of my interests,
Yeah.
basketball, my leadership skills, and academics, I'm able to
Go ahead,
better
plug it in.
prioritize my life and
I got time to stall. I can set it up here. And welcome into Hoopsville, everybody. We're on our bracket special here. If you've got questions for us, tweet us at D3Hoops or hashtag Hoopsville. Email us hoopsville@d3hoops.com. Join us on Facebook, facebook.com/Hoopsville. Of course, the brackets have been announced today at 10:30 or 12:30. Jeez, felt like 10:30 because that's when I started working on them. 12:30 Eastern time for the men and 2:30 Eastern time for the women. I think I said that right. If I didn't, I apologize. Nonetheless, we always say that we'll talk to the committee chairs on these shows, and they've always been gracious enough to grace our time. So we will be talking to Dave Martin here momentarily. But again, if you have questions for us or Dave, tweet us at D3Hoops or hashtag Hoopsville. Email us hoopsville@d3hoops.com or join us on Facebook, facebook.com/Hoopsville. We'll now go to Skype, where Pat had originally been joining us, and now Dave Martin will join us. Pat will join us via telephone here momentarily. I know he's on hold as we speak. But Dave, first and foremost, thank you so much for taking the time to join me. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, David. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. A little interesting occasion. You and I had a conference call earlier this morning. I think no one appreciated the fact 2 Daves were going to be on the call. Made it for some interesting moments on occasions. Listen, first off, your men's team certainly dancing. That's a nice thing, but you were busy with the women's side of all of this. You and I talked during the conference call. You guys were working till 1:30 in the morning, and I got a sense that a lot of that had to do with the fact that a lot of the women's tournaments were finishing late on the day on Sunday.
Yeah, my buddy Brad Bankston arranged it so that ODAC final would go into overtime, that's exactly right. You have the Sunday finals, and in a couple of cases the women went after the men or were pushed back a little bit, so that forces us to get started a little bit later, and it was tough, as it always is. You know, I think the most important thing, a lot of folks will focus on the bracket and who's playing where, and absolutely that's important, but I think that for me the key is, you know, let's make sure we get the right 64 in, or in this case, you know, we had the 20 pool C's, the 20 at-larges, and We did our due diligence. We spent a lot of time on the selection, and if you have 20 pool Cs, there's 24 that probably deserve to get in. That's always the case, but we spent a lot of time on that last the last 4 or 5 spots.
And that's usually the most challenging part. Just to clarify for anybody out there, you guys do pick your teams before you look at the bracket. So, the adage of picking Bethel, for example, didn't have a factor in play for geography. It just happened to be you picked them and then you bracket.
Correct. We do our selections first because, again, we feel like we want the teams that are most deserving to get in. That's what it's all about. Our kids deserve that. So we'll select it'd be a lot easier if we could bracket first.
Yeah.
But it doesn't always. We don't do that. And as I said, the key for us was really trying to make sure that we get those 20 pool Cs. Let's try to get them right.
I believe Pat is joining us now via telephone. Pat, are you there? Oh, hold on. I don't know if everybody can hear each other, to be honest with you. This might be interesting. Dave, can you hear Pat if he's talking?
I can hear Pat.
Good. I can't. I'll fix that with some earphones, so I haven't had to wear in a while.
All right. So, hey, other Dave, how you doing?
Good, buddy. How have you been?
Am I responsible for asking the next
no,
question?
I was just getting my earpiece. I'm now good to go. I can hear you now. I just didn't walk that through.
Let me ask. You don't have to ask any questions. We could just chat. We catch up.
Yeah, there you go. Nothing wrong with that. Let me ask you this though, Dave. As we get into the meat and potatoes of this, obviously it appears it came down to, and I know there's eight teams at the table, but it seems like it came down to Whitworth and Chicago with gaudy SOS numbers and average or missing wins, as it were, from their records versus a McDaniel and a Bethel squad with maybe not great SOS numbers and others, but certainly better winning percentages. How did you guys kind of toy over those challenges?
Yeah, that's the question every year. You've got the high SOS with maybe 7 or 8 losses, and then you've got the high winning percentage, 23, 24 wins, that type of thing. As I've said before, it's really a matter of looking at that whole body of work, and digging in. As I mentioned, that last 3 or 4 spots for us took us longer than probably the first 12 or 14 pool Cs that got in. But I think our committee did a really good job of looking at the full body of work and evaluating each of those schools against each other. And honestly, I think we got it right. I really do.
Hey, Dave, Pat Coleman, may I ask you, if you're, how many games or how many more wins would Whitworth have had to have? How many more D3 schools would it have been helpful for them to have played? Because they played those 6 games against non-D3 schools. What would have been a number that would have helped them?
I don't. That's a good question, Pat, and I don't have a definitive answer. But you're looking at like you guys you threw McDaniel out there, and you got 15-5 versus a 24-3. That's a big gap, and I'm not saying it came down to them, but as an example, that's a big gap in wins. So what's the magic number? There's no magic number, there's no formula, but certainly, and I understand, we understand their situation, the geography of it. But it certainly would have helped them if they would have been able to pick up 2 or 3 more wins in the division.
Talking to Dave Martin here, old habits there. Women's basketball committee chair. He used to be men's basketball committee chair a few years back. In his second year as committee chair, head athletics director at Misericordia as well. And joining us via Skype, of course, Pat Coleman from D3Hoops.com joining us on the telephone as we chat things over here. You also had said to me, Dave, how much the upsets, and obviously all upsets cause wrinkles, but really kind of put some things change the equation. For example, Rhodes almost helped you, but kind of killed some momentum at the same time, maybe for some creativity.
Yeah, with Rhodes winning that AQ, You're right. It's a good and it's a bad in that it's good in that we end up with that pod at UT Dallas, but it with that said, and geography being one of the major tenets of bracketing, it kind of tied our hands there, and this is where it was at, and it was, that was an easy one actually.
Of course, Scranton, DePaul, Transylvania, Ithaca, and then the upset in the ODAC kind of changed some things. All those teams got in. How much do those teams losing also possibly affect hosting scenarios? I saw Eastern Mennonite losing. I kind of guessed that could have cost them a host. Scranton certainly could have put themselves in that position. I don't know if DePaul did, but maybe Transylvania. I'm guessing. I'm not going on any information I have, but how much could those losses not only affect somebody else getting in the tournament, but affect who could get in or who gets a host and who doesn't get to host?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. In determining who gets in and hosting and all those things, again, we've really tried to do a good job of looking at the total body of work. I think with hosting, what we really tried to do, in theory anyway, as you set out, we have 8 regions and there are 16 pods in the country. We tried to reward, if you will, the highest ranked teams in each of those regions with a hosting opportunity. We felt like they earned that. They did what they needed to do in terms of taking care of their business and winning and those types of things. So that's kind of where our hosting ideas came from. Let's try to reward those top ranked teams in each of the regions. Scranton lost, but their total body of work put them in a situation where they were still able to host.
Sorry, I'm calling on a piece of video of one of the teams seeing that they made the NCAA tournament. We'll show that in just a minute.
That's great. Yeah, that's the fun part. You see how excited the kids get. I got here in time today to see our men's announcement, and we knew we were in, but we didn't know where we were going. And we're on spring break, and we had a little get together in our Hall of Fame room, and just see the kids' reaction. It's pretty cool.
Go ahead, Pat.
So, Dave, the other question I wanted to ask you was, we've talked both on and off the air for several years about the fact that when you're stuck with one of those either West Coast or South or Southwest pods that has an empty spot in it, that you could literally fly someone from anywhere in the country to go participate in that pod. So you have one of those this year with Penn State Abington making the long trip to George Fox. Was there any pushback from the NCAA about that? It's a little unlike Division III, but I think very defensible.
Yeah, it was a unique situation. And kind of, again, just who got in and the geography of it all. George Fox obviously had an outstanding year. No matter what we did, the minimum number of flights that we were going to have was 2. It didn't matter what we did. And so we played around with that and shuffled that around quite a bit. We ended up with Penn State Abington. We tried to be consistent with the schools, the number 1 schools, and the schools that had the high rankings. We had to fly somebody from the East out there, so we're looking at what makes sense. And believe it or not, we looked at mileage. I can tell you that I think Penn State Abington's about 2,800 miles. You can look it up. And we had. We looked at Pine Manor, for example. They'd be flying out of Boston. That was over 3,000 miles. So it was interesting. But we ended up, in terms of the geography of it all and making it all fit into place, we ended up sending Penn State Abington out there. And we were going to have 2 flights no matter what. So that's how it came down.
Talking to Dave Martin here, women's basketball committee chair. We'll talk to Jeff Burns, men's basketball committee chair. Coming up a little bit later in the show, Pat Coleman joining us via telephone. Pat, another question?
No, go ahead.
Very good. Obviously, women having the sectional or having the opportunity to host the first weekend, Dave, made things a little bit easier in some senses when you bracketed. But was there any thought to thinking ahead to the next weekend and how that might have some ramifications on travel and what you guys may or may not be able to do the next weekend when you don't have the first rights. And I'm not saying there's anything on the schedule necessarily that's jumping out at me, but I'm just curious if that's part of the thinking when you're putting your bracket together.
Yeah, we talked about it briefly, but again, honestly, one of the things that we did, as I mentioned earlier, David, we wanted to try to make sure that there was balance across the country in terms of those schools that had been the highest ranked schools all year. George Fox, Thomas More, Calvin, Montclair, Tufts. What we set out when we started, there are 4 quadrants, as you know, 4 quadrants of 16. We tried to make sure that we would get 2 1s and 2 2s, if you will, in each one of those quadrants to try to balance the power. The thing that we didn't want to have happen was a situation where it appeared that one school had an easier path to get to Grand Rapids, or one school had a more difficult path to get to Grand Rapids. And I think we did a good job with that. I laugh. I think it was Pat. I could be wrong. Might have been my first year on the men's committee. We had the bracket of death, as it was termed, and that's always stayed with me. The feeling was that one of the quadrants was a lot more difficult than the other 3, and I've kind of carried that with me, and we joke about the bracket of death, but really wanted to try to make sure that we balanced around the country and that we could get the 4 best teams, or get 4 teams that have had great years all year to Grand Rapids, where we'd have a great championship.
When you say that and you look at what you did, what was kind of the message you tell your committee then as you're bracketing? Is there scenarios, and I'm not looking for a specific, but is there scenarios that you had, you're like, oh, come on, let's see if we can avoid that and find something else? And does that add to the time, or is it you guys kind of are already prepared and maybe doing other things to avoid it already ahead of time?
Yeah, no, honestly, David, we didn't do a lot of work ahead of time because you just don't know. You don't know who's going to get in there, and it turns out there are upsets and that kind of thing, and that's probably why it took us longer last night, and then we got back on the call again this morning to get fresh eyes on it, and we were on the call for a while this morning again, making some minor adjustments and tweaking it. It's a matter of starting with those higher seeds, if you will, and as you guys know, we certainly could never seed the entire bracket, the entire championship, but certainly get those higher seeded teams where we want them, and then just kind of filling in with geography being, again, a major driver of what we're doing.
Sorry, doing 3 things. When you talked about wanting the 1s and the 2s into the quadrants and such like that, and you want to look for the most even situations in terms of balance, are you guys looking at just the rankings? Are you looking at SOS numbers? Are you looking at the whole picture to determine if Cabrini-Muhlenberg's the right matchup there, or is it better as something else? And I'm just randomly picking one. It's not that I have an issue with one or another. I'm just
sure
as a reference.
Yeah, no, we do the best we can. Obviously, during selection time, you're digging into everything. When we are doing the bracketing, we're trying to get the best matchups that we can that are going to fit into this bracket and work with what we have to do geographically. So I wouldn't say that we necessarily go through every single pod of 4 teams. And I mean, that if you listen to the guys on the Division I calls, they work for 2 months to massage that type of thing. We certainly pay attention, and we want to make sure that we don't have any rematches where somebody has already met during the year, those types of things. But in terms of really overanalyzing it and digging in that way, I would say not as much, honestly.
Pat? Hello, Pat?
I'm still here. I was defending you on the message board, David.
Uh-oh. Which Dave are you saying you're defending? I'm a little worried now.
Dave McHugh. You can go to the men's pool C board, who you pissed off royally the other day by slapping him down.
I'll care later.
I'm not sure that's true.
True.
Dave, I want to, Dave Martin, sorry. I was just going to harken back to something you were talking about earlier about bracket of death and that sort of thing. Now that you've had a couple years as the women's chair, do you find that is it easier to avoid a bracket of death in women's basketball? Because, is it possible that you find there are national contenders in more spots around the country than maybe there were sometimes in men's basketball?
That's a great question. I think it's easier to avoid because I live through it. I'm probably more conscientious about it, more thoughtful toward it, and we're more aware. I think it's evolved, and I think you guys have a lot to do with that. Honestly, you guys do such a great job of covering college basketball in Division III for both the men and the women. People are more well informed, and I think that's great. It's a good thing. So I think there is a lot of balance across the country. We've got a lot of really good basketball teams, and I think this tournament's going to be very exciting. I'm looking forward to Grand Rapids. I really am. I think the folks at Calvin, we did a site visit there in October, and I've been on just about weekly host site calls with the folks at Calvin and Jim and Nancy, and they're going to do a great job. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I think that we could have 4 outstanding teams there. I think it could really be an exciting weekend.
So Dave Martin, Dave McHugh and I have both been out there. It's a really big facility. The Division III Women's Basketball Championship hasn't put that many butts in seats. I love it, and I'm glad that they're getting a shot. I just wonder what it looks like if there's 900 people in a 5,600 seat arena.
Well, we'll put all 900 in one area to make sure the camera stays there, I guess. No, it's a great question. It is. It's a tremendous venue, and they've worked with us. They've got the big digital scoreboard, the message board. We're going to be able to do some really cool things with that. I think it's going to be really neat, and you're right. It may be a little too big for what we have. We'll find out. We'll see. But I think the kids, I think our student athletes are going to love it. Some of the things that the Calvin folks have planned are fantastic. Grand Rapids is really a pretty cool city. We were there for a couple of days, and there's a lot more going on there than just the Gerald Ford Museum. I can tell you that. So.
That's true. Dave, a question regarding them, though, is, and I know it was before you were on the women's committee, there's times where, a team like Calvin is certainly positioned well to potentially host all the way to their home site.
Yeah.
And in some years we've seen it where that doesn't happen, and they send that team the second weekend somewhere else, and there's always been the theory that they just don't want it to be too much of an unfair advantage for a team to be able to host all the way to their home gym. Have you guys even looked at that potential scenario? Has that even been discussed? And if it has been discussed, is there anything we can learn now about what that could mean should Calvin win too, and looking at next weekend?
Yeah, we have discussed it, as you could probably guess. That wasn't lost on us. But I don't know that there's anything that I'm going to tell you right now that's going to help. At the end of the first and second rounds, we'll get on a call that Sunday morning, and we'll select the sites for the sectionals moving forward. We did talk about it, and you know what? Calvin got the bid to host the national championships, and my thinking is, if it comes out that they deserve to host in this sectional, they probably have a very good shot at doing that. And again, that's not something that we've talked about. We've talked about them advancing and the potential for them to host all the way through. No decisions were made or anything like that. But my feeling personally would be if it is what it is. If they deserve to host, if we just decide that those 4 teams in that sectional, that Calvin's the best host, and my guess is that's probably where we'll go.
Speaking of hosting, if you don't mind me kind of going back a little bit here quickly, Amherst women hitting the road, not hosting. I'm not saying they necessarily did, but that kind of brings up the thought to my head that you talk about trying to get the 1s and the 2s spread out as much as you could. It also looks, and you talked about trying to have as many people host as possible across the country. It looks like you guys did make a conscious effort to at least get, and I don't think I counted more than 2 of each region hosting.
That's correct. That's correct. I think that's accurate. Yeah, as I said, you play all year, and while we have moved closer and closer to a game is a game, and we want to look at this as a national tournament, there's still a very strong regional emphasis, if you will. We do regional ranking. So I guess our thinking was that you play all year, and you're the number 1 seed or the number 1 ranked team in the Atlantic, or the number 1 ranked team in the Central, or whatever the case may be, and you go through that way. If you have the potential to host and you want to host, you should be rewarded because you've earned that. And I think that's kind of been the mindset or the thinking, and that's how we got to where we were.
Pat, anything? I think we lost Pat again. Oh, there he is.
Oh, I'm good, thanks.
Well, and obviously not a ton to talk about, which I always take as a lovely thing. No surprises necessarily. Obviously, there's certain factors in play that come down to this. Obviously, we can't start figuring out the next weekend until we see results.
Right.
But anything in this process that was the most challenging for you guys, we know the last picks, but maybe in the bracketing, what was your biggest challenge that you guys had to face off with this?
You're right, David. The selection piece is always the most challenging because you know that somebody isn't going to get in, somebody that probably deserves it. So that is stressful, and I think that's why it takes so much time. We split hairs, and we want to do the best job that we can to make sure that we get the teams that are most deserving. In terms of the bracket, every year is different because you don't know who's going to get in, and if you look at that split, the kind of East-West split, just the way the numbers played out. We are trying to figure out what the heck we're going to do, and there has to be a flight. And as you guys have pointed out, we're flying Penn State Abington to George Fox, and when's the last time that happened? So that whole thing, playing through that and plugging teams in, it was almost like we had, if you divided the country in half, you had 33 schools that could get places on the East Coast and 31 on the or 32 and 31, so or 33 and 31. How are we going to make this work? And we spent a lot of time trying to, and I know Kelly Shaw's bosses will be happy to hear this. We spent an awful lot of time trying to figure out how we could minimize flights, and we came up with the fact that 2 was the fewest that we could get, and we ended up going in that direction. So that's probably, you always have that. It's interesting. We have a piece of software where you can run your cursor over a school, and it'll tell you how many miles it is from each one of the 16 hosts. That's part of the bracketing. You guys are able to look at win-loss, strength of schedule, and we're looking at mileage sometimes, But
we do all that too.
I know you do. But that was probably the most interesting thing. We knew we had 2 flights, so how do we make those work and make it work with the rest of the bracket, I guess.
Let me ask you that then, since your time on the men's committee and now on the women's committee, I know a lot has changed. This is now 2 years in a row. I know both chairs have not been out to Indianapolis, and I've gotten a sense that because of technological changes and such, that you guys don't have to be in Indianapolis. A lot of it is now what you would get in Indianapolis is right at your fingertips in front of you now. It's the only change is the venue and maybe having the liaison sitting right next to you versus being on a telephone instead. Is that the right kind of understanding of it? Is it changed so much that there doesn't need to be a trip to Indianapolis to make this work efficiently?
I think you're right to a certain extent. The technology piece, we're fortunate. We have a guy named Ethan Walker who is he is the guru. He's really good, and we've got more stuff on the computer screen than you could ever imagine. I can remember when I was on the men's committee, we're still writing the 8 schools down on an 8.5 by 11 sheet, and I still do it out of habit. And as one team goes off the board, I cross it out and you add another team to the bottom, and it's funny. But I can actually, I don't want you to see any of the schools.
Oh, darn.
But there's my, you can see it, that's my tablet. As they come off, you cross them off, and that's the way we used to do it. Now we don't have to do it that way now because of technology, and Ethan is absolutely fantastic with all that stuff. I still do that, but yeah, you're right, David. With everything that we have available to us, it really doesn't necessitate us being in Indy. I'll go back again, my time on the men's committee, we had the big board, and I remember John Williams and I putting pins. We'd put pins on the map to look and see who was in, and we're looking at it that way. And that stuff is all antiquated, if you will. It's not necessary anymore, and that's a good thing. The other thing that I think is pretty cool. We talk about all this technology, and we have more data than we've ever had. But I think that the ranking and the bracketing, there's still an art to it. It's a science, and we've got all the numbers and all the data. But I think that there's still an art to it, and I think that's the beauty of having a committee. And I think that's why there is still a need for a committee. If it was if it was just a matter of plugging numbers into a computer and it spits out, here's your teams, I think some of the excitement, some of that human element would be taken out of it. I think that, I know in the case of our committee, the group is very objective, very conscientious, trying to get it done the right way. But at the same time, there's that human element to it, that the art of ranking and bracketing, and that's fun. It's interesting.
Can you do me a favor? Can you hold up that sheet again? I just wanted to see the last 8 teams in. Just hold up that sheet really close to the camera.
I could zoom in and you couldn't.
No, please.
I have terrible.
Oh, I can read it. My dad's a doctor. Come on, let me see the sheet. Darn it.
Wrote it in red and green, Dave.
Yeah. Any chance I can find out who the last 4 in were? I can read it. Come on.
You want me to tell you who the last 4?
Yeah. Who were the last 4? Do you mind if we ask that?
You can ask it.
I didn't. Okay, I'm asking.
No. You know I'm not going to divulge that.
It's worth a try, right? Let's see here. Oh, okay. So here's an interesting question. I don't know if you're going to be able to give the answer. This is a fan who's has got a team who's hosting the upper right, and those 4 hosts would be Tufts, FDU, Scranton, and Geneseo. But kind of just give everybody a sense, not necessarily the answer to that, because I don't know if that's a fair thing to do, but what are the steps to determining if it were those 4 and we don't have any surprises here and somebody is an outlier that's going to force a different decision here. But what are the kind of the decisions you guys will go through when you decide to who will host the sectionals?
Yeah, that's a great question. We'll get feedback on how each of the first, second round tournaments went at each one of those sites, and provided they go well and there aren't any issues, we'll do a save and compare, if you will, just like we do with selections and with rankings. We'll look at those who's left, and we'll see, okay, who is the most deserving to host? Okay, this is School A is the most deserving to host. Are there any issues with them hosting? Do they have any other events on campus? Blah, all those things that you try to take into account, and that's how we come up with a sectional host.
Pat, did you have something? Oh, I heard.
No, I was going to pass along that question from Twitter also. I just wanted to, I don't know if we're...
That's a great question. That's a great question. And honestly, again, guys, just speaking from past experience, that's kind of the way that we've always tried to do it. You look at who advances, okay, and you kind of compare those four, and you look at them, and who's the most deserving, who has the best resume, and as long as there are no red flags, you didn't have hotel issues, or you didn't have, whatever the case may be. That's kind of how that's been decided.
One of the other questions I had regarding hosting too was, are there minimums that you guys are at least looking at? A lot of these schools I don't think are in play here to hit minimums necessarily, but is that always an overriding factor that could change things?
Yeah, that's all. And again, it falls under the umbrella of the committee, but I'm going to be honest with you. I mentioned Ethan Walker earlier. All that information, schools have to submit all that information, facility information, that kind of thing. And Ethan just does a great job of sorting that out. And if there's a school that doesn't meet a minimum, it's not like we're like the court size or something to that effect, seating capacity. We're not surprised by that on Sunday night at midnight when we're trying to bracket. We know that in advance. We actually have discussed those types of things at our annual meeting that we have in the spring when we get together in Indy for a few days. So there are minimums that is looked at. We do have knowledge of that, but the national office, in particular, our guy Ethan Walker does a great job with that stuff.
Well, sir, I've kind of run out of stuff on my end. I'm not sure about Pat's end, but I'm pretty sure we don't have anything other to ask you because, well, we now have raised the bar, and we expect this to be a terrific bracket every year, Dave. I'm just warning you now. It's a good thing you've got 2 more years on this committee.
Well, every I appreciate your the undue added pressure, but no, we honestly, I've said it before. In all of my years of committee work, I'm so impressed with the level of professionalism, the integrity of the people on the committee. At the end of the day, all they want to do is get it right and give our student athletes the best possible experience that they can have. And it's it's labor intensive for these few weeks. You put a lot of time and effort into it, but it's really cool to see people giving of themselves and giving back and trying to make it a quality experience for the kids. And I'm as I said earlier, I'm really excited about Grand Rapids. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think they're going to put on a good show, and hopefully we'll have some great games.
Pat, before I cut them loose, any final things for Dave?
No, Dave, I just wanted to thank you for joining us and being willing to join us on Selection Monday. I know that you're probably as beat as Dave and I are, so anytime that you're willing to come out, take the time, answer questions from crazy fans and me and Dave, who may also be crazy fans, definitely appreciate it, man.
No, my pleasure. I've said it before, guys. I really do appreciate all that you do for Division III basketball. If you think back, I've been here at Misericordia for 26 years, and as you guys know, I started my career as the men's basketball coach. If you think back to when you guys first started, and the message boards, and I don't follow that stuff. I stopped.
Oh, yes, you do.
You got good, but the interesting thing is how much Division III basketball has grown, and you guys really do have a major hand in that. You've played a big role in advancing our game and just generating excitement and people following it and talking about it. And I really do, and I know a lot of people feel the same way that I do. We really appreciate all that you've done for Division III basketball.
Well, thank you, Dave. Appreciate the kind words. Thank you for joining us. Always enjoyable to talk to the chair. I'm sure we'll pick your brain a little bit, maybe off air next week after you've made decisions on sectionals.
Yep.
But as always, enjoy the tournament. Get some sleep. By the way, we suited up. I don't see a suit on you.
No.
Come on.
I've got a pair of the old gray sweatpants on the bottom, buddy.
Yeah. Oh,
now we're on spring break, so I'm casual.
Oh, nice. Spring break. There's anything but right now. Well, thank you so much. I offer, as always, final word. Any final thoughts you want to share, especially anything you want to make sure people understand?
No, just, thanks again to you guys. A special shout out to my committee. They put a lot of time and effort and energy into putting this all together, and I really think they did a great job. I think we got it right with the 64 that are in, and looking forward to a great tournament. I hope people that are in the area of these games, I hope you come out and support Division III basketball.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Take care of yourself. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys.
Absolutely. Dave Martin joining us here via Skype. We appreciate him taking the time. We're going to take a quick break, then we're going to have a quick segment with Pat, and then we're going to talk to a couple coaches coming up here at 4:30. If you've got any questions for us, tweet us at D3Hoops or hashtag Hoopsville. Email us hoopsville@d3hoops.com or join us on Facebook at facebook.com/Hoopsville. More Hoopsville right after this.
I used to never really talk. Ever. I was scared and shy. It was hard to look at people's faces. I was afraid if I said something wrong, everyone would laugh at me. But then I started to play golf with Special Olympics. I made friends and won lots of gold medals. But I learned more than just playing golf. Special Olympics helped me to find my voice. And now everyone else is speechless.
We've got more schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's 800 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over a decade. From Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the University of New England, and from Hope to Calvin. Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do. We're at D3Hoops.com at www.d3hoops.com.
Division III allows you to be able to give yourself to other things. Not even just participate in them, but really get involved with them if you want to.
There's a lot of interaction. It's not just sitting back, taking notes. You're actually doing hands-on things and better preparing yourself for your major.
Choosing a Division III school, I've had the opportunity to develop my leadership skills and to be more involved on campus.
Division III in athletics, affords students the opportunity not only to participate in intercollegiate athletics at a competitive level, but also gives them the opportunity to, engage in the other interests in their campus and in their lives outside of that sport and outside of the academics on the campus.
And to have opportunity to have time to join clubs and being able to play basketball, it allows you to just be able to do everything you want to do. I wouldn't change it for the world.
We've got more schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's 800 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over a decade. From Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the University of New England, and from Hope to Calvin. Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do. We're at D3Hoops.com at www.d3hoops.com.
I know sports is important, but having the academic part along with it is a big plus.
I've discovered in myself, a newfound ability to overcome adversity at all different angles.
At a Division III school is really shaped around you developing yourself as a complete individual. The end result in my mind is you just become a very well-rounded person.
Before I came into college, I didn't really think I'd be able to balance so much. It helps a lot that you have a family with your team that can guide you.
With a D3 school, there's a lot of time for other opportunities. The coaches expect a lot of you during soccer, but after soccer, that's your own personal time to really find out who you are and other opportunities that you can pursue.
By balancing all of my interests, basketball, my leadership skills, and academics, I'm able to better prioritize my life and to manage it.
College basketball lives in Kansas City at the College Basketball Experience at Sprint Center. The College Basketball Experience is the place to get your game on. It's not a museum, it's an experience you won't forget. Discover the history of the game in the National Collegiate Basketball Hall of Fame, featuring the Gallery of Honor, Mentor Circle, and Honor Theater. Suit up in the latest CBE logoed Nike gear at the CBE Hoop Shop. Elevate your game today and visit the house that college basketball built.
And welcome back to Hoopsville, everybody. Hope you're enjoying the show. Our selection, or our bracket special. Forgot to do this as we were going to break. I wanted to show the excitement that one team had when they found out they had made the NCAA tournament. This team had to wait a while. Pool C bid, or Pool C a bid for them. They were an at-large team. They had to wait about, let's see here, well over 3/4 of the bracket to be announced. Watch Transylvania as they finally realize that they are dancing in the NCAA tournament. Whoop, sorry, hit the wrong button, and there we go. Pretty cool for them, and you'll notice at the very beginning of that video potentially that they looked extremely nervous. Waiting for that decision to be made, but they are into the dance. Congratulations to them. We got about 10 minutes before we're going to get to another guest. We're going to be joined by Nancy Fay from WashU. First time that they are hosting the opening weekend since 2008, I believe is the number. I got to double check here. Hold on. I had it in front of me and then lost it. 2009. We'll also talk to McDaniel women's basketball coach Becky Martin on getting into the NCAA tournament. Becky and I talked a couple weeks ago. She thought they had to win the AQ or they had no chance. In the meantime, Pat Coleman rejoins us on Skype. First and foremost, always nice to talk to Dave Martin, as we've talked to him many times over the years, even in his roles as men's and women's committee chair. But it's interesting this year, not a lot to talk about in some capacity, because a lot of it seemed pretty obvious, or at least straight in nature.
Yeah, I mean, it's surprising / pleasant to not have a lot of contentious conversations about these sorts of things, right? It was a fairly straightforward discussion you and I had last night. It was only down to the last couple of spots. It wasn't our last two spots that were at issue. Even it was the I think like the third to last spot and the fourth to last spot where we went in a different direction. But in all honesty, there's a lot to be happy about in this bracket, and then as long as you're not University of Chicago or Whitworth, there's a lot to be happy about.
Sure, absolutely, and it's sad for those two teams. It's going to be sad for some teams anyway, no matter how we looked at this. I think it came down. I think Dave Martin kind of said it there. At some point, you got to win games. And at some point, yes, you have a nice SOS, but unless you can win with that SOS, there's only so much the committee can do with it. Just on the flip side of that, I think McDaniel was in trouble with a weak SOS. Let's say there was one more loss there, they're probably on the other side of that equation. Though we thought they were on that side of the equation with with the 3 losses, but apparently not quite there. So, it's a give or take. It's not a perfect science. It's not an exact answer. You might get a different answer next year too. But more importantly, the big thing is win your games. And as we talked about with Chicago especially, there's a couple of losses in there that they couldn't afford. And it goes back to that point, Pat, that we say, we haven't said it much this year, though, interestingly enough. A game on November 15th counts just as much as a game on February or March 1st or February 28th. That game against Manchester counts just as much as that game against anybody else in your UAA schedule. And while it's tough for Chicago, that's how it works. And of course, next year, any game on November 13th, by the way, will count as much. But that's just something we haven't talked about a lot this year, but that's kind of the key.
Yeah, and U of Chicago has basically 3 of those type games, or 2 of them for sure. The Whitewater one is the very opening day. Manchester one is a week later on November 22nd. And yeah, You have to, all of those games count. Just because they happened 23, 24, 25 games ago, they don't get wiped off your record. Whereas, in some of the other more highly publicized brackets, the last 25% of your schedule might be more important. Here, all of those games count. We only play 25, right? We don't play 32 or something like that. So you got to make the most of them. That's for sure. Look, I was going to spin looking forward to your Becky Martin and your Nancy Faye conversation.
Yeah.
We talk about some of the things that are facing those teams coming up ahead. You mentioned it has been a little while since WashU's been in this position. Obviously, they've had, they've continued to be a nationally prominent program, and they've been to the Final Four in that stretch, right? They were at the Illinois Wesleyan Final Four, am I correct?
Mm-hmm.
They play in the title game. They've won a title, right? They've been, they've still been in the conversation. The men have been good enough to help keep the WashU women from hosting, but this particular pod. It's something that WashU I would think would be heavily favored in, but they have a potential matchup against Thomas More in the Sweet 16 that should be pretty interesting. So look forward to that. Obviously, I don't think Nancy Faye is going to necessarily look forward to that.
I don't know if Thomas More is going to look forward to that, to be honest with you.
No, I mean look forward to it in the course of this conversation.
Sure.
Yes, that also. I'd like to hear from her. Her take on NYU, her take on some of the other teams that she's played, who are in this tournament, or teams that she's seen on film. If she'd be willing to talk about, some of the things that she's seen along those lines, I think that would be interesting for the listenership, as it takes forever for the schedule to load. Southwestern. I mean, we're probably not going to talk much about Southwestern otherwise. Did she see anything on November 22nd that made her think that they might come back around when it was all said and done and win that conference championship? I think that might be just an interesting tack to take with her.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to chatting with her. I mean, again, getting a chance to host for the first time since 2009 is pretty big for them. Of course, the men will be hosting on Thursday in that bye game against DePaul. But I'm looking forward to hearing her. They had that tough matchup against NYU at the Kohl's Center, and it didn't let them affect them, which I think is always the impressive thing. You can get an emotional game like that kind of take a hit on, and they didn't. They kind of bounced back and had a really good season the rest of the way. They may be, they're always a good team, but they may be that team that maybe no one wants to see in this tournament if they're that unrattled.
Dave, you could ask her if she's happy to see the Kohl's Center go away after this year.
Yeah. I don't know. I kind of got for the sense that they're going to miss it. I didn't hear that from her necessarily, but I got a sense from the men at least that they're going to miss the place. That that's part of the lore of going to NYU. That's part of the history of Division III. What we might try and do on Thursday is talk to those at NYU. We've gotten a request to talk about what the future of the Kohl's is going to be in the future of basketball. But it's nice to see that they get to host. We had been told that they couldn't because they were hosting wrestling. It turns out that was on Sunday. So they get to host.
I have Rob Knox working on that for Around the Nation. So
in other words, I should not touch it, is what Pat's trying to do. I had a nice donation, but I'll find somebody else. I'll find somebody.
Oh.
No. Yeah. They had choices. We had choices. So we will
I gotcha.
We'll go to the
On the McDaniel side, obviously, I mean, the obvious story is them getting second life, having a chance to still play after getting knocked off in the Centennial Conference tournament.
Yeah.
How far down were they? Did the rest of the team kind of get the same sense that Coach Martin sounds like she had, that it would be a tough slog for them to get into the tournament? And so, how do they feel about that? Where are they going to take it from here? That sort of thing.
Yep, absolutely, and see if they even watched it in person. Maybe some teams probably don't want to see the bad news, so maybe they didn't watch it. We'll talk to her coming up here on the show. If you got questions for us, tweet us at D3Hoopsville or hashtag Hoopsville. Email us hoopsville@d3hoops.com or join us on Facebook at facebook.com/Hoopsville. If you got questions for us or our guests, we'll talk to Nancy Faye and Becky Martin. Then we'll switch gears into the men's side at 5 o'clock. We'll be talking to Jeff Burns, the men's committee chair up there. I don't know what that meant. Don't have any guests lined up necessarily, but that doesn't mean we might not stumble into some as we have so far on the women's side. Pat, before I let you go, any other thoughts about what Dave Martin had to say or whatnot?
No, I just think it's I think it's just been a breath of fresh air for the last couple of years for this committee to have someone who's got committee experience in this sport, even to kind of give this crew a little jump start. I mean, we've had some, I'm not gonna gosh, let's see if there's a good way, diplomatic way to say this. We haven't had the greatest relationship with the women's basketball committee, and we've tried to cover women's basketball extensively. And sometimes, if there's not a willing partner on the other side who really wants to talk about Division III women's basketball and engage with us on it, then it's really hard for us to do a good job covering the sport. Dave Martin has been the opposite of all that. It's been fantastic chatting with him over the last couple of years in regards to women's basketball, the same way it was when he was heavily involved / chair of the men's basketball committee. So I just think it's great for women's basketball to have somebody who really cares about it and gets how important it is to get out there and kind of spread the good news about Division III women's basketball as well, to be in charge of that committee and be in a position to help set the agenda, for lack of a better term,
Absolutely. Good point. It's been fun to chat with them, and it's nice to just get answers sometimes. Sometimes we've been ducked, and that's on all occasions, men and women. And we don't try not ask tough questions, and I think this year we certainly don't have to ask tough questions.
Well, I think we try to ask fair questions, right?
Yeah.
And fans have tough questions, which may not always be fair, and we try to filter them and ask the fair questions that really need to be asked. And it's nice when we do that. I think it's fair to expect answers, and the chairs recently have been great at that.
Yep. Well, I'm going to let you go, sir, so we can get to that interview. We'll get you back on when Jeff Burns comes on.
See if you can do any of that.
I'll glean, yes. The big word from yesterday. Thank you, sir. Pat Coleman joining us here on the show. We're going to take a break. Nancy Fay joining us on the other side from WashU. Of course, we'll also talk to Becky Martin from McDaniel. You're listening to Hoopsville, presented by D3Hoops.com, the National Association of Basketball Coaches. More Hoopsville right after this.
College basketball lives in Kansas City at the College Basketball Experience at Sprint Center. The College Basketball Experience is the place to get your game on. It's not a museum, it's an experience you won't forget. Discover the history of the game in the National Collegiate Basketball Hall of Fame, featuring the Gallery of Honor, Mentor Circle, and Honor Theater. Suit up in the latest CBE logoed Nike gear at the CBE Hoop Shop. Elevate your game today and visit the house that college basketball built.
We've got more schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's 800 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over a decade. From Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the University of New England, and from Hope to Calvin. Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do. We're at D3Hoops.com at www.d3hoops.com.
I know sports is important, but having the academic part along with it is a big plus.
I've discovered in myself, a newfound ability to overcome adversity at all different angles.
At a Division III school is really shaped around you developing yourself as a complete individual. The end result in my mind is you just become a very well-rounded person.
Before I came into college, I didn't really think I'd be able to balance so much. It helps a lot that you have a family with your team that can guide you.
With a D3 school, there's a lot of time for other opportunities. The coaches expect a lot of you during soccer, but after soccer, that's your own personal time to really find out who you are and other opportunities that you can pursue.
By balancing all of my interests, basketball, my leadership skills, and academics, I'm able to better prioritize my life and to manage it.
We've got more schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's 800 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over a decade. From Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the University of New England, and from Hope to Calvin. Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do. We're at D3Hoops.com at www.d3hoops.com.
I know sports is important, but having the academic part along with it is a big plus.
I've discovered in myself, a newfound ability to overcome adversity at all different angles.
at a Division III school. School is really shaped around you developing yourself as a complete individual. The end result in my mind is you just become a very well-rounded person.
Before I came into college, I didn't really think I'd be able to balance so much. It helps a lot that you have a family with your team that can guide you.
With a D3 school, there's a lot of time for other opportunities. The coaches expect a lot of you during soccer, but after soccer, that's your own personal time to really find out who you are and other opportunities that you can pursue.
By balancing all of my interests, basketball, my leadership skills, and academics, I'm able to better prioritize my life and to manage it.
And welcome back to Hoopsville, everybody. Hope you're enjoying the show. I'm your host, Dave McHugh. If you got any questions for us, tweet us at D3Hoopsville or hashtag Hoopsville. Email us, hoopsville at d3hoops.com, or join us on Facebook at facebook.com/Hoopsville. Still talking a little bit about the women's bracket, which came out second today, and the ramifications of that, and who's in, who's out, who's hosting, and all that jazz. So if you've got questions for us, we'll certainly try and answer those. We're also talking to a few coaches along the way who have certainly been impacted, mainly in a good way, on those bracket announcements. And one of those was certainly the WashU Bears, the UAA champs. We knew were into the tournament, but we weren't sure what that might make, what might happen of them. We figured they might host. We weren't sure, but they did get a chance to host, first time since 2009. And joining us on the Hoopsville hotline is their head coach, Nancy Fay. Coach, welcome to Hoopsville again.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. First and foremost, congratulations on not only the UAA championship, but certainly making the NCAA championship tournament. Just that accomplishment and all, especially in what would turn out to be a pretty challenging UAA season this year, has got to be something you're thrilled about just in the beginning.
Well, it came down to the last game against University of Chicago, and it was a tournament fever last Saturday, and we were just really fortunate to get the win and get the automatic bid, so we're very happy about that.
Of course, Chicago ended up being a big factor. NYU, where you guys lost on the road to their place, etc. All factors, but you were able to withstand that, and certainly a tough Chicago squad. You make the NCAA tournament. Did you think you had any chances of being able to host?
Did I think we did?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was hoping. I mean, I think we hope all the time if you get an opportunity to play in your home court. We've done a lot of traveling in my years here, and I've always told players and people around the program, wherever you want to send us, whatever we have to do, we'll go. So it's still played on a basketball court, but I did feel like last year we had a number one seed, but it was a rotation. They went to the men's side, and we had to travel, up to Oshkosh. So I thought this year, I mean, these seniors, I guess I just felt like after these 4 years they deserved at least to have a round here, and I was really happy that we were able to do that.
Of course, first time since 2009 you get a chance to host. That's got to be big for you guys to be able to take advantage of. I know you probably would love to take advantage of it, but it's been a while, as that indicates, and so you kind of probably been itching to get this opportunity.
No doubt. Like I said, I think that sometimes you can get caught up of people like you can analyze who you're playing, where you're playing, and I think that's something we've tried to just stay positive regardless of where, when. We understand it's a tough job for the NCAA to figure this all out of what's the best in all scenarios. So, but there's no doubt, when you can keep your kids on your home court, that's something we're looking forward to.
Talking to Nancy Fay, head coach of the WashU Bears, the women's team on to the NCAA tournament. Now, of course, they will be hosting, as we point out, the opening weekend. Of course, I should know this by heart, but because I've been staring at it all day, but I don't have it in front of me. There we go. You'll be taking on Spalding, and then on the other side will be Transylvania versus Wittenberg. I know this is early on, and so I'm not expecting you have the answers just yet. But what are your thoughts on the at least the first weekends of games that you guys have lined up?
Well, I know that Spalding has done a great job this year. They've, I believe, they have a Division I transfer, and they've done coach has done a good job. We played them last year. I think we were down 10 or 12 when we started the game, and so we're looking forward to it. With Wittenberg and Transylvania, I think we saw Transylvania a couple of years ago. Again, another well-coached, and I know Wittenberg won a really tough games with, I believe, DePaul, and so I have a great deal of respect. I mean, I think this point, you hope you can go out and play your best basketball and see what happens.
Of course, on the other side, don't want to prognosticate too far down the road, but we do like to look at the bracket down the road. You got a lineup there of a potential game against Thomas More on the 13th of March, should you guys get that far. Certainly tough, but I have a feeling that this year, not a feeling, it certainly looks like this year the women's bracket in general is going to be tough. There's going to be tough matches eventually. You're going to have to face off against them. And have you had thoughts of that if you get through these two games?
Oh, I'm so on Spalding right now.
I know.
I think that you have a great deal. I mean, with the Thomas Moores, there's a lot of undefeated teams out there. George Fox. I mean, it's all going to be. I tell kids everybody's good. I mean, and that's exactly what you have to understand, and that's why it makes it fun.
Of course, looking at the fact that Chicago didn't make it, NYU, though, is in on the other side. Interesting developments in the UAA. Let me start with NYU. Love to get your take. This is a team that beat you on the road at the Kohl Center. Of course, you returned the favor at your place. What are your thoughts on NYU? Are they as dangerous a team as I certainly think they are?
I think they're extremely dangerous, and I think they're balanced. They have a great inside game, complemented with a perimeter game. So it's kind of like you pick your poison and guess which one. Hope that you can pick the right one. One time we didn't, and the other time maybe we got lucky on it. So they're I think they're hosting first round also. And I think it's going to be, I just thought the UAA, throughout this, anybody we played this year it was very competitive. So it just hopefully will help us in the postseason.
Back to on to Chicago, missing out on the tournament with a 17-7 record. Are you surprised they didn't get in?
I understand it's a tough job with the NCAA, but I really did think they belonged in. They were on a 12-game winning streak. They were co-champs in the UAA, played an incredibly tough schedule. And, you don't want to question what people have to do, but after playing them, it was, that game on last Saturday could have gone either way. Extremely talented. So I was disappointed to see that they weren't included.
Nancy, you guys should have just rolled over and let them win.
I don't think anybody rolls over at this time of year.
No, absolutely not. You don't want to put it into somebody else's hands.
That's exactly what I said to the team.
When you look at maybe the story that is Chicago in the sense of not getting in, how hard is it when you schedule to balance putting a competitive schedule together that at least will turn some eyes in the sense of a strength of schedule, while also putting something together will rack up some W's that can also help you as well?
It is really, really difficult, and I think that's the hardest thing that coaches are experiencing right now, because you're scheduling, trying to get that strength of schedule up. So, and sometimes it's regional. You have to play regional. For instance, you have to play local. You can't travel just to do the strength of schedule, depending upon what part of the country you're in, how many teams you can play. And then one year you may be thinking you're scheduling somebody, and teams go up and down, and you think it's going to be, and it's not. I think it's probably the biggest challenge we have as coaches now is how to figure that out.
Talking to Nancy Fahey here, head coach of the WashU Bears. They'll be hosting Spalding coming up on Friday, and of course on the other side of that will be Transylvania versus Wittenberg, the winners to take each other on Saturday. Of course, the men are also on Thursday going to be at your place hosting a single game. So a lot of busy basketball to take place at WashU, but that's almost what you guys thrive on there is the two programs.
Yeah, we're excited that the men are hosting too. I have to admit, when it first came up, I'm like, I was wondering if we were going to get to host. But I was glad that they were able to do that. The men's and women's teams support each other. We get to travel with each other out throughout the year, so it makes it special that we get an opportunity to play a lot of basketball here next Thursday, Friday, and Saturday.
Before I let you go, back to NYU will no longer grace the court of Kohl Center, as they will be tearing that place down. and building something. You're going to have to go elsewhere, whether it be Baruch or somewhere else for a few years. Will you miss the place? Will you have any fond memories of the place?
There's been some battles there, hasn't there?
Yeah.
I'm excited for them. I know that it's going to be quite a transition. We're going through one here also with adding on a facility. So yeah, there's some fond memories, but there's some memories I could also let go of. So that's okay.
Maybe like the last game.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't want to say that, but you're right.
Well, when I was at that game, obviously, it was a heck of a battle, and certainly they were revved up. It was 2 undefeateds at the time. What do you can you take anything from games like that you can use in the postseason now?
I think that's what with the. I think every coach right now has a great deal of respect for their conferences and their competition, and that's what I have. I think that I have such a deal of respect for the coaches in the UAA that it helps us prepare every time, and so that when you get to this point, that you're going to be challenged by other coaches and other teams, and I think that our conference prepares as well as I think a lot of conferences do for everybody else. So, just ready to roll. So
we should just pencil you in for another national championship, I would assume.
We do not. Yeah, right now again it's Spalding, so and that's where our focus is at.
Sure, I can't wait. You'll get taped soon, as it were, and be able to start breaking that down. Well, congratulations on yet another terrific season at WashU and the chance to host, as we said, first time in 5 years. I know you're looking forward to being in your own bed for this weekend instead of on the road like you always do. As always, we give the final word, though, to the guest. Any final thoughts you want to share with those who may be tuning in?
Well, appreciate, and it's going to be an exciting time for basketball, and I know you guys do such a great job promoting. So hopefully it's 3 weeks, and that's what we're looking forward to.
Yeah, hopefully we'll see you in Grand Rapids, but obviously you got to get past Spalding on Friday first.
That's exactly right.
Thank you, Coach. Take care of yourself. We'll look forward to talking to you in the future.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Nancy Fay joining us here on Hoopsville. Appreciate her taking the time to do that. If you have any questions for us, tweet us at D3Hoops or hashtag Hoopsville. Email us, hoopsville@d3hoops.com. or join us on Facebook at facebook.com/Hoopsville. Going to take another break. When we come back, we'll go to McDaniel and talk to Becky Martin, head coach of the Green Terror, who got in as an at-large bid, maybe in the stead of Chicago or Whitworth. We'll talk to her about the team's reaction to that. You're listening to Hoopsville, presented by D3Hoops.com and the National Association of Basketball Coaches. And, of course, viewers like you. We'll talk about that in a minute. Thank you, and we'll be back with more Hoopsville right after this.
I used to never really talk. Ever. I was scared and shy. It was hard to look at people's faces. I was afraid if I said something wrong, everyone would laugh at me. But then I started to play golf with Special Olympics. I made friends and won lots of gold medals. But I learned more than just playing golf. Special Olympics helped me to find my voice. And now everyone else is speechless.
We've got more schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's 800 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over a decade. From Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the University of New England, and from Hope to Calvin. Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do. We're at D3Hoops.com at www.d3hoops.com.
Division III allows you to be able to give yourself to other things. Not even just participate in them, but really get involved with them if you want to.
There's a lot of interaction. It's not just sitting back, taking notes. You're actually doing hands-on things and better preparing yourself for your major.
Choosing a Division III school, I've had the opportunity to develop my leadership skills and to be more involved on campus.
Division III in athletics, affords students the opportunity not only to participate in intercollegiate athletics at a competitive level, but also gives them the opportunity to, engage in the other interests in their campus and in their lives outside of that sport and outside of the academics on the campus.
And to have opportunity to have time to join clubs and being able to play basketball, it allows you to just be able to do everything you want to do. I wouldn't change it for the world.
And welcome back to Hoopsville, everybody. Sorry for the delay there. It's a little bit of a crazy day, as you can imagine. If you got any questions for us, tweet us at D3Hoopsville or hashtag Hoopsville. Email us hoopsville@d3hoops.com or join us on Facebook at facebook.com/Hoopsville. Talking women's basketball, and one of the teams that is maybe a surprise to get in, and I'm pretty sure it was a surprise for them as well, was the McDaniel Green Terror out of the Centennial Conference in Westminster, Maryland. So we go to the Hoopsville hotline to bring in their head coach, Becky Martin. Coach, welcome to Hoopsville.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to speak with you. I didn't expect to be speaking with you today, but I'm glad that we are.
I have a feeling that, you probably are a little surprised to be speaking with me at the same time. I think things just got a little bit easy, huh?
Well, I wouldn't say they got easy. They got very frantic and very hectic, and a lot of excitement here on campus. So, yes, you have 12 young ladies that are grinning from ear to ear. It's one of those where you see that change in someone's faces. It was quite a view. So we're just elated to have a shot in the big dance.
I gotta ask, did you have the team gathered around to watch the announcements, or were you guys so sure you weren't in and you didn't do it?
We kind of went low-key. To be honest, maybe I've been around the block a few times. I know how emotional this can be. And after, the unfortunate loss over the weekend and to see where they were emotionally, I just didn't want them to have to sit through another letdown. So it was kind of, anybody who wanted to come into my office, they were more than welcome to do so. And I think what they did is they were in different areas of the campus kind of by themselves, but from what I understand, pretty much they all knew at the same time. They were all watching. They just kind of did it within the confines of their own private area. So.
You guys found out about a third of the way, almost halfway through the bracket, as they announced you guys would be taking on Stockton on the road at Salisbury. But my question to you is, what was your reaction?
My reaction is, kind of jokingly, thank God, and just excitement for the players, and looking forward to heading to the Eastern Shore of Maryland. So we're again elated and looking forward to going after Stockton, who's we haven't seen for a few years, but. As I said, we're just right now beaming from ear to ear about the opportunity to be in the NCAA since it's been a few years.
Go ahead.
And again, I was just going to say, and there's not one person on my team that has had the opportunity to live through this experience, and so they're in for a big treat and a big ride.
Yes, they certainly are. My question would be, you didn't get out and do a little dance, have a little fun with this at all?
Well, that's happened. We did have some people come into my office, and they shot some type of confetti things off in my office, which, if you can see my office, it's normally not in good shape to begin with. It still has stickers up from the 500 win, so it's looking pretty nasty.
Yeah, I was going to say, your office has been ground zero for celebrations this year. They decorated the heck out of it. I believe, I heard 500 Post-it notes left around.
We still have about 300 sticking up on the walls, the green and gold, and now we have multiple colored confetti that's over the desk, on the floor. So I'm sure the festivities. It's great. It's a lot of fun. I'm not sure our, unfortunately, our maintenance and cleaning crew are going to be too happy housekeeping, but we'll see what we can do to help them out.
You mentioned, good luck. You mentioned you're going to play Stockton, who you haven't seen in a while. Of course, the game's down at Salisbury. Any thoughts on Stockton without having looked at tape yet?
No, to be honest, we're going in. Right now we're going in blind, and needless to say, what we're doing is we're going to be gathering as much information as we can, breaking down films, looking at the matchups and statistics, and trying to get a better handle on their style and how it matches with ours, and come up with a game plan in the next couple days to see what we can do to come up with a win.
When's the last time you were at Salisbury?
I don't think it's been in this century. It's been a while. It's been a while. Now, let's put it this way. I can say I drive by Salisbury on my way to vacation at one of Maryland's gems, Ocean City, but have not been to Salisbury University in quite a few years.
Well, technically, if you're driving by the campus, we need to give you new directions to Ocean City. There's a lovely bypass from Route 50. Curiosity, you and I talked a couple weeks ago when I was at McDaniel, and you thought the loss, and I did too, the loss to Hopkins was really putting you in a spot. You had to win the AQ to get in. Of course, you guys had what I heard was a thrilling game, atmosphere-wise, against Muhlenberg for the Centennial Conference. I think other people had confidence you would get in. Did you change your thoughts on it, or were you and our conversation post-Hopkins the same all the way through until today?
I think mine were more of the conservative of I want the cup to be half full, but it may be half empty, because we knew that loss was a crucial loss. We knew we were capable of playing with the best teams, and we've had a great year. But that was one of those where, we didn't play well. They did, and it's tough, as all the teams at the top know, when you're running on a 10-game or a 13-game winning streak or whatever, trying to play up every game is difficult. And we thought that was going to be our Achilles heel, that there would be no grace after that. But we're just elated that the committee saw it differently.
Certainly saw it differently. I still think you probably had a bigger reaction than you claimed this subdued one when you finally when you finally saw your name pop up.
There was a little bit of a scream. Okay, there was a little bit of vocalization that came out. We had a few people in the office, and trust me, when I saw that, I was not able to contain myself without a little bit of jubilation there verbally.
Certainly. By the way, Luke Stilson says it was 1998 the last time you took a trip to Salisbury, about the time that they were just trying to get you on the other side of the shore, Coach. Get a few games. So technically this would be out of region for you.
Yeah, across the bridge, over the river and through the woods, so to speak. No, we're again. Salisbury's done a phenomenal job, the last couple years, and we're looking forward to them hosting us for the weekend, and we'd like to stay as long as possible, and be playing the second in the championship game, but. Again, this is still kind of a shock. I, emotionally kind of set myself up for, how do we get the kids ready, for any other type of postseason, if the NCAA isn't in the cards. So I get to change my tactics and my speech.
Oh, that's true. Get to freshen some things up a little bit.
Yeah. Trust me, they're going to be smiling from ear to ear. When we get together as a group. They're all starting to come in now. We're going to meet in a few minutes, and they said now it's all the fun about this is what your life's going to be for the next couple days.
They might have more confetti bombs. You might want to watch out. I'm just saying, they've got a bad habit with your office.
Yeah, my office. Well, when you've been around as long as I have, it has a tendency to collect things, and I say collect treasures. But right now, there's a lot of treasure on the floor and on my desk. So.
One more question before we let you. Well, a couple more questions quickly, but the first one would be, you look at how you scheduled this year, and I think you knew going in it wasn't the strongest schedule you could put together, but does an experience like this maybe change your tactics down the road to try and hedge your bets just a little bit more?
Well, part of it is when you go from winning a conference championship, going to the NCAAs, and then totally rebuilding. The first thing you're trying to do is get a schedule where helps you build, gain some confidence. And last year we turned the corner, and we had already had some things in line for the schedule. So you're kind of hedging your bets. You still want to make sure you don't know exactly what your recruiting class is going to be like. You know that you've made progress. Have you made enough progress? And you still want to have a viable schedule where you think you can be successful. So. And then ultimately, it's not that you're not going for the automatic. You're going for the automatic qualifier. If you get the at-large, that's always been the gift. But certainly lesson learned, because this was one where you're really sweating it out. And we're going to try to strengthen the schedule up a little bit next year. But sometimes it's you do what you can, and you don't know what everybody's going to have next year. And I'm not going to name names, but we have, a team on our schedule that's been a traditional opponent who just didn't have a great year this year, and they've been strong. You can't foresee that, when you're doing schedules. So I'm certainly, elated that given the circumstances, we're still going to the big dance, and hopefully we can rectify that next year with with our schedule, and put a few more schools in there that you think may be a little stronger. But if they know for sure, good for them, because they've got the crystal ball, and that's one thing that's missing in my office is the crystal ball.
It's buried under the confetti, Coach. And the Post-it notes. Well, hey, thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate it. Congratulations. As one person pointed out, the last time you went to Salisbury, they were still called Salisbury State.
You are correct. You are correct. So what are you trying to indicate? That I've been around a long time and I'm old?
No, because I've been around that long too, Coach. I know them when they were Salisbury State as well. As always, we give the coach the final word. Any final thoughts you want to share with those who may be tuning in?
Again, McDaniel's just elated to be a part of the big dance, and any Green Terror fans hoping for your support down at Salisbury. That was one of the things that hosting our own conference championship. We got so many great compliments about the championship atmosphere here with our fans. So again, thanks to all the support this year, and we're looking forward to going as long as we can. One more game.
Exactly. Well, good luck, and we'll look forward to seeing how you do.
All right. Thank you very much.
Take care.
Have a great evening. All righty. Bye-bye.
Take care. Becky Martin joining us here on the Hoopsville Hotline. We appreciate her taking the time to do so. By the way, what I got told was at the Centennial Conference Championship, the men's team showed up at the championship game in retro basketball jerseys to support the women's team. You got to love that. Terrific effort by everybody. Certainly happy to see them in. Didn't think it would happen. I'll be flat out honest. Did not see that coming. But they are there, and congratulations to them. Going to take another break. When we come back, Jeff Burns, the athletics director at Randolph-Macon and men's basketball committee chair, will join us here on the show. If you got questions for him or ourselves, you can tweet us at D3Hoopsville or hashtag Hoopsville. Email us hoopsville@d3hoops.com or join us on Facebook at facebook.com/Hoopsville. More Hoopsville right after this.
I used to never really talk. Ever. I was scared and shy. It was hard to look at people's faces. I was afraid if I said something wrong, everyone would laugh at me. But then I started to play golf with Special Olympics. I made friends and won lots of gold medals. But I learned more than just playing golf. Special Olympics helped me to find my voice. And now everyone else is speechless.
We've got more schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's 800 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over a decade. From Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the University of New England, and from Hope to Calvin. Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do. We're at d3hoops.com at www.d3hoops.com.
Division III allows you to be able to give yourself to other things. Not even just participate in them, but really get involved with them if you want to.
There's a lot of interaction. It's not just sitting back, taking notes. You're actually doing hands-on things and better preparing yourself for your major.
Choosing a Division III school, I've had the opportunity to develop my leadership skills and to be more involved on campus.
Division III in athletics, affords students the opportunity not only to participate in intercollegiate athletics at a competitive level, but also gives them the opportunity to, engage in the other interests in their campus and in their lives outside of that sport and outside of the academics on the campus.
And to have opportunity to have time to join clubs and being able to play basketball, it allows you to just be able to do everything you want to do. I wouldn't change it for the world.
And welcome back to Hoopsville, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the show. I'm your host du jour. Of course, I'm always the host. Dave McHugh here from our Hoopsville studio. It's been a long weekend, obviously, as we've been getting ready for the selection shows that took place earlier today on the men's and women's sides. Of course, at-large teams took place last night, or at least those selections were made, and the brackets were announced today with those at-large bids. If you have questions for us or our next guest, you can tweet us at D3Hoops or hashtag Hoopsville. You can join us on Twitter, and that's it, at D3Hoops or hashtag Hoopsville. Facebook, Hoopsville at D3Hoops.com, or join us, that's email. See, I'm already getting confused. Email is Hoopsville at D3Hoops.com, and Facebook is Facebook.com/Hoopsville. Did you get it all? If you missed it, don't worry. There's that little scrolling thing at the bottom of the screen. You can see what you're doing. Now, Dave Martin did not suit up for us. He was in a warm-up suit, but Jeff Burns apparently has suited up for the show because we know he did it for the show. But the men's basketball committee chair will now join us here on Hoopsville via Skype. Sir, thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, only the best for D3 Hoops, Dave. I appreciate you guys having us on.
Well, absolutely. I appreciate you taking the time. It's very much appreciative. Certainly, it's nice to get questions answered. I saw your bracket first, nice and early this morning, and I was blown away by a couple of things. One, that you guys did not spend all night working on this, as you told me, but also it seems like you may have kind of changed the structure. Let me get into that first, if you don't mind. You guys kind of took a page and decided to start tackling this sooner. You had said to me that you had hoped to look at things out a few weeks in advance, and I assumed you would, but I didn't realize you really were going to take a full-on effort to start kind of looking at bracketing ahead of time, looking at who you might be bringing in ahead of time to make the process on Sunday a little bit smoother.
Yeah, Sunday's a tough evening, and I heard Dave Martin talk about what they did, and I've been through it now a couple times, and you'd asked me back at the convention some things that we might change, and it just made sense to do as much work as we could as early as possible so that we were fresh. And I think sometimes when you go through 6 hours of arguing over who should get in, and when you get to the bracketing piece, which is another big piece of what we're doing, sometimes the exhaustion takes over and you miss certain things. So in an effort to try not to miss anything, to try to get it as right as humanly possible, we started out probably 2.5 weeks ago just talking about seeds, talking about possible hosts, seeing who would be in consideration as time went on. And like any year, you get upsets at the end that change some things, and the numbers change, and win-loss changes. And so we made changes. I probably did 20 brackets, just kicking it around. A couple of us on the committee are kind of into fooling around with that kind of stuff. So some of it was fun. A lot of it paid off in the long run because I think it made our Sunday a little bit easier.
How much? I'm kind of curious. I meant to ask Dave Martin this, but it wasn't as prevalent. But how many changes did you guys have to make to regional rankings before you even got started on things? And I mean that in the sense that obviously you get a regional ranking from your committees. You might want to make changes to that, and then another set of results versus regionally ranked opponents becomes a factor, and then you can make changes from that. Did you guys make a lot of changes, or did you guys kind of stay pat, or how did that all transition?
Yeah, it's a great question because phone calls Sunday morning with the RAC committees. And sometimes the RACs get a little frustrated when the national committee makes some changes. And when you get towards the very end, you kind of have taught each other a little bit as you're going along. And you feel like in the end, the RAC has a good feeling for what the national committee, what our struggles are, having 8 regions across the country. So this year on that Sunday morning call, I think the South met at maybe 8 a.m., 9 a.m. We did 2 things. We came up with what we thought were the numbers showing for us that day. And then we had a couple games still in play, and we did some what-if categories. So what it allowed the national committee to do was to look at both rankings, to let the day play out itself a little bit. But we were able to actually start looking at teams around 11 o'clock in the morning, the teams that might be put in, teams that might be hosts. So really what it did is it cut a lot of our day. It started it much earlier. We took a break at 1 o'clock. We came back around 3:30. We wrapped up around 9:30 or so, got back the next morning, had a look at it again, a little bit more awake, feeling a little bit better about ourselves, and felt like it worked out pretty well for us.
I was going to say everything in hindsight can be changed, and I'm sure you could go through this 100 different ways and change anything. What was the most challenging part of this bracket that you guys had that you had to tackle?
Well, you know as well as anyone, it's the mileage restriction and trying to create a national tournament with a mileage restriction. There was a couple things that were important to us. I've been along 3 years now, so I've heard the criticisms in the past, and I've listened to the feedback. And I've said this from day one as the committee chair. I'm not a men's basketball coach. I'm an administrator, but I'm listening, and I'm trying to do what's the right thing for everybody. We've got a great group of people who sit around, and we had 15 brackets put together at some point. We spent maybe an hour on one line for different meetings. Challenges is that mileage, who gets in, when they get in, and where they are. How can you set up a situation where you can have some diversity in the tournament and still honor the 500 miles? How do you limit the number of flights? A lot of fun, and sometimes you get yourself caught a little bit, and we just scrap the entire thing and try it again. I think for us, the big thing for us was really working on those seeds and kind of having anchors in the brackets, and then trying to work around some of those brackets. And some of them, we struggled a little bit ourselves. We struggled with the Augustana line. They certainly deserve the bye, and we've got DePaul and Wash St. Louis playing each other, and we spent maybe an hour 15 minutes trying to figure out what else we could do, and in the end, we've got some great matchups, and some are in a round of 32. There's a couple great matchups in the first weekend. We've got some divisions, some regions across the way playing. I think we've got the William Patterson has 4 different regions represented, if I remember correctly. So it's an interesting bracket. I hope that the people who look at these things and enjoy it do enjoy it. But then again, it's game time. So ball's going to go up pretty soon, and we're going to run through this thing.
Pat Coleman is on the phone. I don't know if how much he's been able to hear, but Pat, do you have a question before I start rattling off? Because I could keep talking with Jeff. Jeff and I talk all the time.
No, but I do hear this interview much better, Dave, so thanks for that. I guess one of the questions I had, Jeff, and first of all, like Dave said, thanks for joining us. The thought I had was when you come back and look at it in the morning with that fresh set of eyes, which is, crucial, obviously, how many changes do you end up making? And are they, this is cosmetic, or changing teams around from one line to the other, or trying to look fresh at a pod and see if there's a way you can make it more diverse? Or what are the kind of things that you tend to come back to when you're doing those redos at the end? Yeah, the exact same things that you're talking about. Sometimes you miss who has played each other before. You think that you know it. You're pretty certain. So you go back when you break that 9 o'clock. I think what everybody did was go back to their regions, try to figure out, hey, are we avoiding as often as possible anybody that's played each other? Hey, are there any other matchups that we can move a person, say somebody out of the East, and swing them down? And Randolph-Macon has driven the 499 miles. I know what that trip's like. Last year I had an opportunity to have Springfield come down. It was 461. They played at Randolph-Macon, and Charlie talked about the national tournament and how, in a sense, that was a part of it, to be able to get on that bus and travel. So we weren't afraid to use it liberally. We took a look at it.
I worry a little bit when you have a bracket in front of you and you start making changes that you the next day that you may forget something that's right in front of your face. And you guys did this last night. You look at so much stuff, you're staring at it, and my biggest fear was making sure that we didn't miss something that was right there, obvious.
Well, I definitely have the same. I definitely have the same thing. I was glad to hear you talk about the busing, and I know that you guys have done that. The men's basketball committee's been very proactive in that, and Randolph-Macon's been a beneficiary, perhaps. Let's say. I'm gonna harken back to the football conversation. The conversations with the football committee. The football committee this year felt like they had a mandate, or at least a strong suggestion from the central office, that they wanted to keep teams closer to home, that even though you could bus someone 499 miles, if there was a way to bus them 125, that was really the way they should go. Did anybody ever talk to the men's basketball committee about that sort of thing this year?
Yeah, I'm not aware of it. We made it pretty clear early on what we were hoping to do with this tournament. We meet after the tournament. We try to evaluate what we did the year before, and the diversity that Dave talked about earlier was something that we were striving to do. I'm not looking to have a team drive past 2 or 3 host sites to another one. If there's an opportunity for us not to do that, we looked at it. But you start looking at so many things. Who has played whom before, whether the women in the first week have a host site, whether everybody's put in a bid to host, and sometimes they put in bids for the weekend and may not put it in for single games. By the time you get everything, you finally get it down, you're looking at the matchups, and do you think that they're good matchups? And didn't have anything from the NCAA, and that, the biggest thing is the flights. And, we're, as the women are, we're at 2 flights, and with a little luck, we may not have that many more. With some upsets and results, it may go the other way. We spent several hours trying to figure out how to predict out, which is kind of silly in this business, but to predict out what might happen. And a lot of this is set up on percentages. You set up a bracket, and there are some slight changes that you could do. There's some things that you might be able to do, but some of it's percentages and trying to figure out how you can get teams through without the flights. And I think the NCAA, to their credit for the men's basketball, they saw where we thought a great bracket. They saw where we have an opportunity to cut flights early, and we're hoping that if things break the right way, maybe they won't cost us flights later. But they weren't willing to say no. They liked the bracket. They were willing to support it. And in the end, when we got up in the morning, we had the bracket that we kind of went to bed with. We made 1 or 2 changes of some swings that we thought would add to the tournament a little bit, but not too much.
One of the things you had said to me in the lead up to this, and you even said something to me in Salem last year, was we talk about matchups that we've seen a lot of, and we try not to see a lot of those again. You had told me that you were certainly going to look back at matchups from the years past, especially in areas where we see a lot of common games. That'd be the Central Northeast example. How much did you guys look back? How much influence did it have?
We went back 4 years, and we've got Steve Ulrich, who kind of gets into this stuff. He was a chair last year, and I owe a lot of gratitude and thanks to Steve, not just for the committee and what he does, but for allowing me the opportunity to chair this. We went back 4 years, and we were trying not to get the same old matchups. It's easy. I mean, in Texas, for instance, it's sometimes easy just to have the Texas schools play the Texas schools. And we had an opportunity this year to at least get a little bit of different flavor down in that area. They're frustrated by the fact that they're playing the people they've played all the time. We're frustrated by the fact that we're bound to the mileage, but we are, and that's their challenge. And they'll have a pod that one of them will come out of and get into the Sweet 16. Steve did a great job with some of that stuff, and felt real good about all the committee and everything that they did.
Should point out you are the athletics director at Randolph-Macon. Of course, when a head coach has his own school on the table, as it were, whether it be for an at-large or for being voted on, et cetera, they have to recuse themselves. I have never asked an administrator if that's their role, but furthermore, got a question on Twitter. It says, as chairs, what's the process for when your own school is considered for the bye? I'm just kind of curious how that does kind of evolve for you, especially considering your role.
Yeah, the bracket piece is probably not my strength, so it's easy for me to step back and not be a part of it. So really all that stuff was taken by the other people. I had absolutely no voice in that. I knew that we would be up for the bye. The committee, I'll tell you, if you're out there and you're a coach and you're listening to this, you need to get involved with your RAC and then try to get onto the national committee. It's a lot of fun, a lot of interesting stuff going on. But you've got 8 people there that I think have spent so much time early on going through all this stuff, getting to know each other. Me stepping off and not being a part of that process was not an issue and nothing that I was concerned about.
Do you have to step aside when Randolph-Macon is being considered, or because as an administrator you don't have necessarily the same role, you don't have to necessarily recuse yourself when talking about rankings, for example?
Yeah, our national committee, and when Randolph-Macon, if they're going to be spoken about, then I have to recuse myself. We've got Brian out at Buena Vista. Anytime that we were going to talk about Buena Vista, Brian had to get off the call. I'm not sure that's a good or a bad thing. I think to make sure that there's no bias going in, it's important. But when you spend as much time as we do really delving into all this stuff, and each of us have our strengths. Some people are just really into numbers. Some people are really into the brackets. Some people have just great recall on who's played. So it's hard to lose somebody on the committee that has some great strengths. And we try to get them back in the first chance that we get.
Talking to Jeff Burns, chair of the men's basketball committee here as we are looking over the bracket that came out earlier today. Pat, any other question from you before I dive into another one?
Yeah, actually, I found it interesting. I was going to ask you, Jeff, if there was a 4-team pod anywhere in this bracket that kind of exemplified the extra work that you guys put into doing this. And then you just said that you're not so involved with the bracketing. So I don't know if this is the best question for you or not, but when, for example, when we were mock bracketing last night, we really take to heart some of the things that you guys have said over the past couple of years. We would try to make each pod as diverse as the map would allow us to do, and as diverse as we can do, given the the relative seeding and the relative strength of each of the teams. So, is there a pod of 4 that you guys put together that kind of measures that for you?
I talked earlier about the Patterson pod. I think it's fascinating, and I know Virginia Wesleyan's traveling there and know that team very, very well. I have a lot of respect for Coach Macedo and what he does. And I think when you've got 4 regions represented, it's going to be an interesting thing. We do a lot of speculation across regions with the numbers, and to actually see it play out, it's going to be exciting. We kind of take on our bracket 4 teams per bracket, so there's probably 16 teams that we look at as maybe the anchors on each side, and we started that way. And sometimes you have people who played each other in that, and you've got to, we don't necessarily seed 1, 2, 3, and 4, but there is some information there that you could suggest that are certain ways, and we try to make sure 1 is playing 4 if we can, and 2 is 3, but there are so many other factors that come in. It's hard to keep it just that way, but that's what we'd like to do. It got down to the point where I put a number on every line at one point and tried to match regional rankings and lines and making sure we were doing that. In the end, I think it was Steve who went through and added up 3 different ways. We took a strength of schedule look at what the pods were. We took an RPI look at what the pods were. We looked at regional rankings and tried to balance it as best we could, still have some diversity within it, still stay within the 500 miles and make sure that we were going to get it accepted by the NCAA. I think we hit it great on some areas. On some areas, we got a little jammed up, and in the end, we've, like coaches say, you got to play the game. So sometimes you're playing them a little earlier than maybe we would have preferred if we could have everything our own way. But that's how it broke out, and our group felt pretty good about it. I hope the teams will feel good about it and get after it a little bit.
Jeff, I think that Dave and I, when we chatted over this bracket this morning, first of all, we didn't disagree with any of the teams, obviously, and we were happy about that. But, it was hard to really quibble about much of this. So it got down to the point where we were just kind of looking at cosmetics at the way the bracket is kind of laid out. So, for example, the St. John Fisher pod, the way that it's just listed here makes it seem like Amherst is the top seed in this pod and St. John Fisher is just hosting for whatever reason, maybe for geography or something. But that's not correct, right? St. John Fisher is the top team in this pod, correct?
Well, they're the host for sure. And if you were going to argue between St. John's Fisher and Amherst, the St. John's, we really wanted to honor the teams in the regions that were the number 1. We need to be met halfway. I don't think that's going to be a steadfast rule that if you're the number 1, you have to have it. But Amherst is a very good team, very good program. We felt good whether either team was going to have that. But cosmetics, the first time I heard it was this morning talking to Dave as we were prepping for a little bit of stuff. And, in looking at it, we could have flipped a couple regions to be more traditional to what the Division I model does. We kind of had the 4 brackets divided into 4 separate brackets. And then the top team on there may have been the strongest team we considered at that time. But It's more cosmetic than anything else. I've gone back over it after Dave's comment to try to look and see if it made any sense. And we didn't spend a lot of time on that part of it. We spent much more time on just making sure the matchups were where we wanted to go. And as far as you guys picking it and we picking it, that was good news. It was nice to see. I mean, there's a lot of good teams. I don't necessarily want to talk about the teams that were left out.
Darn.
I'd be happy to answer questions. It's not for me to bring it up in that regard. There's a lot of good teams, and I said early on that if you had 8 different people in this room, depending on what the leadership was and what the years before were in their experience, the big question is obviously strength of schedule and wins and losses. And each of my 3 years, it's kind of held true that people are one way over the other. But I think in this committee this year, there was a lot more talk to say, hey, what is that SOS number? What does it really mean? What are the layers? Let's get into it. And the criteria, you guys know them as well as anybody, but there's a lot of other things that we consider besides the wins versus ranked opponents and the strength of schedule and the winning percentage. We try to get into your non-conference schedule and what that SOS might be. We try to get into wins versus teams with 15 or more wins 500, significant wins on the road. This year, I would say the first time in my 3, we were really as a committee struggling once we got to number 12, because it was just such a different year in this country. There was a lot of losses taken. I thought early on in the year there were a lot of losses, and so we had a little bit more problem getting into 15 or 16. And those last 2, it's nice that you guys picked what you did and it matches what we do. But the truth is, it's tough. It's really tough at the very end, and I feel bad when we select one over the other, because somebody's season has just ended right there. But spent a lot of time trying to get it right.
Talking to Jeff Burns, chair of the men's basketball committee, I would agree with you. I think Pat and I ran into about the same point where we started running into the challenge of the bubble at right about 12. Pat, if you got one more, I'll let you have it, and that way I'll rattle off some here the rest of the way.
Okay. I think one that's gotten the most noise, but I think that Dave and I understand certainly very much why a team like Southern Vermont is left out. And I'm sure they were probably not even at the table when it's all said and done. But, is there a point where someone who's got whatever they had, which was, I think, 3 losses against Division III opponents and a sub-500 strength of schedule, what does it take for someone with a sub-500 strength of schedule to get in as an at-large? Do they have to go 27-1, basically?
I don't want to say great question, because that is the question everybody asks, and it is, and I think it's going to change depending on who the 8 people in the room are. If you look at who got in this year, I think we had a Catholic get in with a 505 strength of schedule. 3 weeks ago, if you'd have told me that 505 was going to get in, I would tell you that history said it probably wasn't going to get in. This was a different year. We had a big gap between teams with high strength of schedules and teams, nobody in that 550, 560 range. And I don't want to be held to that number, but in years past, there was a lot more of a grouping in there, so that the people at the 530, the 520s, it was tough. And some of you may have known that in the NCAA, we've worked with the statistical people to try to come up with something that kind of balances the wins and losses with the strength of schedule. And we've come up with an equation. We've been told that 0.03 in the strength of schedule, at 0.03 you reach significance, and we've equated 2 games to that significance. So when a team is at a 530 and other teams at a 560, we equate 2 games there. So we try to get those to be equal. If we can get them to where we think we're equal, then we get rid of them and we start working our way down the list of other things that we can consider.
One of the things that jumps out at me was obviously Catholic getting in with that 505. Of course, at some point, the win-loss percentage is what we heard from Dave Martin certainly was, hey, at some point, the win-loss percentage has to take some precedent. But you're kind of in a tough spot there. You have a high win percentage with Catholic with an okay, below subpar, let's say, below par SOS versus, say, a St. Norbert who's got a very good win-loss, but even further down SOS. At some point, one of them's got to trump the other, but I'm guessing on the flip side of that, it can't just flat out be one or the other. They kind of do go hand in hand in some capacity.
they do go hand in hand, and you guys know, the process. We look at it early on, and we look at the teams that, you mentioned a team with one loss. Winning games in Division III men's basketball is tough. And the last thing you want to do is discount people winning games. I hear it all the time from coaches. Do you know how hard it is to go on the road and win games? And we don't. Our problem is you've got 8 regions. We have very limited information, in a sense, from certain regions to other regions. In other areas, we've got a ton of stuff. In the Northeast, obviously, we've got a ton of stuff that we can use and look at. So comparing it across is tough. We've tried to come up with this thing that balances out a little bit. Had a chance to speak to Dave Martin about it a little bit, and wanted to run by our theory with their rankings and where they were, and we'll spend more time doing that. It's tough. Winning games in the Division III men's basketball is hard. We certainly don't want to discount it. But from my perspective, when you get to the point where you're looking at 8 teams left on the board and you don't have a lot of information between any of them, where do you go? And we're lucky to have something called team sheets, where we can look at where teams are playing across the RPI, across the country. So I may not necessarily know what's going on in the West and compare it, but I've got in the top 1 through 50, I know what I did against the top 1 through 50, and I know what you did against the top 1 through 50. And then it breaks down from 51 to 100 and 101 on up to 150 until it ends. So that gives us a little bit of information that I'm not sure everybody can find and see. And sometimes when you're deciding, that's the piece that really, really helps us. So in a situation where you're talking about Catholic, Catholic at 22-4, won a lot of games. And that last week or so, they stumbled a little bit. They were on the board against people that had a little bit better strength of schedule, but the truth was it wasn't significant based on the statistical piece. So that 22 wins and what they did against teams that were either ranked or above 500 or 15 plus wins. And the other thing we want to see is an away win. Winning on the road is tough, and the statistics will bear it out. So, man, you get into a lot of the weeds, and sometimes you sit there as a committee for an hour, and you just want to vote, and we don't. We try to wait that as the last thing. We'll joke that if the committee's listening out there, they'll know that one guy kept talking about the same thing over, and he felt bad that he kept reiterating the same thing over and over again. But that's what you do from the region. You talk about your region, you support your region, and then at some point you got to be professional, and that's what they did last night, and this is where it came out.
Kind of a couple of questions I wanted to ask regarding hosting and bracketing. First off, obviously the women hosting, we kind of got an idea that WashU and St. Thomas would not be able to get that opportunity. Were there any other challenges that you guys faced in hosting? Anybody you wanted to send and couldn't because for some reason there wasn't something done? It always seems to happen every year, so that's why I always ask it.
I appreciate you asking, and I know you want me to be up front, but the last thing I would do is
no, I'm not necessarily looking for someone to get thrown under a bus necessarily. I'm just saying, were there challenges that you guys had to deal with?
Yeah, well, there were, and you're working with the committee and the women's committee. We do things a little bit differently. We're waiting to hear what they're going to do. And Randolph-Macon, for one, upset in our quarterfinals on the women's side. It would have been a women's host here, and you guys are kind to have Randolph-Macon at number 1 in the country. But the reality of it was we were going to be on the road had our women got the bid. So there was a lot of that kind of stuff going on. WashU certainly, and WashU has been great. We reached out to them, and we wanted to be able to make something happen and give them an opportunity to get that Thursday game. And from everything that I've seen and the way they're handling it, it's going to be really well done. And in the end, that's the key for us, having places that are going to do a really good job and host and stuff like that. So we had some challenges. We worked through them. Lots of stuff going on behind the scenes. Elisa Halpin is our NCAA liaison. She's fantastic. She cut through a lot of the stuff and was able to get us what we needed to make sure we got what we wanted.
You've got Whitworth traveling to Emory, and you've got Claremont Mudd Scripps traveling to Texas. I don't think anybody was surprised that those teams were traveling those locations. I think some figured that Whitworth would be the one in Texas and Claremont might be the one who's sitting in Emory. Any particular reason? Did flying from Tacoma to Atlanta easier than trying to get into Dallas or anything like that?
Yeah, we didn't spend a lot of time thinking about it. It may be. We just liked the way it looked. Emory last year had the opportunity, the way that everything broke out, to get a bye. Very good team. I think they went on to Sweet 16, if I remember. this was a year, and it's not always going to happen, that we were able to get a 4-team pod down there. So happy to be able to send some other people. Whitworth going down there, I think, is going to be in a bracket that they're going to enjoy. Good teams, and they'll get on the plane, they'll get there, and they'll have a good time. But didn't think much more of it beyond that, just like the matchups.
Well, and similarly, Jeff, you mentioned earlier just the ability to put a pod in Texas where, I think the Texas people have been pretty vocal in the past about not having great opportunities from the NCAA. Maybe not so much in men's basketball, certainly in women's basketball. But so my question to you is kind of based on something that Dave Martin said in our conversation with him. These two brackets or these two pods were basically locked in. Regardless of how you might shuffle Whitworth or Claremont, you knew that these 8 teams were going to be playing at these 2 sites. Did that make it easier or more difficult to set up the rest of the bracket, having those teams kind of locked into place?
Yeah, it probably makes it easier, but it's also a little frustrating. And it's just due to the limitations of what you got. But the truth is, it does take away 8 lines that you don't really necessarily have to spend too much time thinking about it. The Texas schools, I feel for them. I'm the South chairman, so I hear their struggles, and we've talked at length about some of the things that they face. It was important to me. I didn't know whether it would happen, that we would try not to get them to be playing each other, or at least be able to add. I mean, at one point we had 2 teams possibly flying in there. And again, 15 brackets, I could probably come up with every scenario there is. But as wins and losses happened, and Hendricks with an upset run through their tournament threw us a little bit of curveball, but we had our what if scenarios, and that was all certainly a part of it. But we felt good about being able to have a 4-team pod down at Emory. We felt good about being able to mix it up a little bit in Texas. I'd like to think that the committee moving forward will continue to make efforts to diversify it a little bit when they get the opportunity.
When a team like Hendricks wins, or Wesleyan wins the NESCAC on Sunday afternoon, I picture kind of like a collective groan from you guys and virtually tearing up sheets and throwing stuff up in the air. When a 6 seed wins, we had 2 6 seeds win on Sunday. Is that one of the 15 brackets that you've prepped?
It didn't really hurt us this time. Again, I think, and a lot of it was we spent so much time. By the time that happened, we really had the what ifs and the scenarios where if A won, this is where they might be, and if B won, this is where they're going to go. But the fact that it's the Texas school, that really limited us being so creative. So it wasn't so bad, but I can certainly see where if it happened a few more times across the area, it could have really thrown some stuff off. And you're guessing on mileage. I mean, we put a pinpoint map together. We probably started at the beginning of the year, and we put pins on every place that we thought we may have a team that's gonna go, and we put circles around every 500 miles. And last night, I would be honest with you, we spent 25 minutes asking questions on mileage, and I can't tell you how many times it was literally 500 miles, and it stopped us from doing something we wanted to do. Randolph-Macon traveled, and you guys know we went 467 and went back 499.7. I tried to move our physical address to a little bit farther down the road, and it didn't happen. But we had, I think, 2 occasions where we were almost right on the 500-mile line. And the truth is one of our committee members found the trip to be 492, but we've got the NCAA and the way they use their thing, and that's what it was. And so that changed a little bit. So the frustration is really when you think you've got something really good and you just can't make it work, and then you get into a situation where, all right, this is what we can make work. Let's do the best with what we got, and let's see if we can't get it going a little bit.
Before we wrap up, one of the big ones that jumped out was obviously the one that was first announced, WashU on that Thursday game, playing DePaul, then traveling on to Augustana. When you and I talked prior this morning, you talked about how that was kind of the one that you guys spent the most time on. Can you give us a little bit of insight as to what you guys were trying to accomplish, or what was bothering you so much, besides the obvious that it's WashU versus Augustana there for a potential second round, barring Bill Fenlon listening in and his DePaul Tigers pulling off the upset of WashU?
Yeah, 2 years in a row where the first line out becomes controversial. So we had the other problem with Randolph-Macon gets the bye on the other side, and I'm certainly the athletic director at Randolph-Macon. So whichever way we went on that, it probably wasn't going to be great. But WashU is a great ball team, and Augustana, they deserve not only the bye, but they probably deserve a little bit easier road if you're able to set that road up for them as maybe a number 1 seed in that top left side. What bothered us is a couple years ago, I don't know if it was 09 or not, but I heard Dave mention it. He was a part of it, I guess, the death grouping, and it's just tough when the mileage sets you up for great teams having to play each other early and not having a chance to move. So we really, rightly or wrongly, tried to break up that group out in the central area to make it a situation where we didn't have to play them all. And what we ended up doing is, I don't know if getting caught is the right term, but we ended up in a situation where we tried to move people all over the place to maybe have different matchups in that game going into the bye. I hate to say it, but after about 2 hours and all these different chances and moving and asking for mileage, we got down to a point we said, this is probably what we need to do. We know it's a great match in a round of 32 if it gets that way. We've got the St. Thomas bracket as well. They're not able to host because of the women's issue, and they're going to St. Norbert. And if those two teams happen to advance, from a power rating, I think you guys at D3 Hoops have them as maybe the 3rd and 6th team in the country. Not something that we necessarily pay a ton of attention to, but it's something that basketball fans know about, and we didn't want to create situations that we didn't have to, but kind of felt in those two, we had to go with it, and we made the choice to go, and the rest of it was probably came together a little bit easier.
Well, Jeff, I think this is the year where you can get away with something like that. There's so much, there have been, all those upsets that you mentioned earlier that I think we would pretty much just accept anything and say, well, that's just the way the basketball is this year, right?
Yeah, may have gotten lucky with some of that in some regard. I just want you to know that we thought about it. It's not that we listen, we talk about it. This was a different year. I'm surprised. If you talked to me prior, I would have told you I would have thought it would have gone a little bit differently. Strength of schedule is the big discussion, not only in men's basketball, but in all the sports. And, at the NCAA, when I went out for our meetings, they talked about the criteria, and they said that, there's no priority order, but each committee has the ability to maybe choose one over the others if it's something that they believe in. And I think that's going to change with the makeup of the 8 people that'll be on this committee. I'll step off in September, I believe, and there'll be a new chairman and maybe some new direction. But this year, a lot of losses, a lot of parity across, and I think, Dave, you may have, on some of your D3 Hoop stuff, had talked about how hard it was for you to do a ballot because of really good teams being beaten by teams that on paper didn't look good. There were some tough losses, and we looked at all those things. But, yeah, this might have been a year that kind of worked that way for us.
Wrap it up here with Jeff Burns, National Committee Chair, Athletics Director at Randolph-Macon for the Men's Basketball Committee Chair, we should point out. Bracket has been set, 62 teams. They'll move on to Salem in the championship weekend. Anything in this bracket that you kind of look at and with a smile or something that just says, I kind of like how that came together, or I like what we did there, or anything that jumps out at you that you kind of was the point of the mission, as it were?
Well, the mission was important. I'm not sure I'm going to point to anything that I really feel good about because, to be honest, we're trying to make the whole thing come out. And everybody kept asking me, how'd you feel about the bracket? And I'd write back, I felt great about 95% of it. And when I say 95, I feel good about the bracket. I think that we spent so much time trying to keep the things, balance of strength. I thought was important. I thought the diversity when we could find it was important. We wanted to honor the number 1 teams in the region, so we kind of had our tenets. We tried to hang on to them as long as we could until we kind of got stuck with some of the parameters. But feel good about the bracket. Feedback's been very, very good. But in the end, and I think Dave, and I listened to Dave, he said it, games, coaches are ready to get playing, and we've had our calls. We've got our host stuff going. I'm hoping that the people taking care of all the people traveling do a great job. And we got some weather issues possibly coming up, so we've got challenges. But from a bracket standpoint, I really like how the committee tried to stay on task with the things that we thought were important.
Pat, anything else before we let Dave go?
No, I think we're good. Done a great job. I think you just said you were going to let yourself go, though.
That's a fair point. I did. It's been a long couple of days myself before we left. Go ahead.
He compared me to Dave Martin. I'm not sure that's a very good one. I can't live up to Dave's Dave's shoes. I've seen him. It's great that he's been involved with the men's side, and we had a fascinating conversation between the two, and learned a lot just talking to him. So appreciate it.
Well, thank you, sir, for coming on. I got nothing else. I mean, I got a lot of notes, but nothing of significance. I appreciate you taking the time to join us and talk about this. Certainly fascinating bracket, and really, I think you have, as I said, I think probably on the show, the NCAA show, you're going to have tough matchups across the board here no matter what, just because it's that kind of year. So, as always, we give the guests the final word. Any final thoughts you want to share with those who may be tuning in?
Yeah, more to the coaches that are out there. Our committee tried to listen to you. We talked to the NABC. We've heard you talking about wins and strength of schedule. Get involved. Try to get involved in this process. Couldn't have enjoyed representing it more. I'm looking forward to being at the Final Four in Salem and heading out to Indianapolis for the D1 and meeting with the coaches. And as you know, Dave, I'm open for conversations. So if anybody wants to send something to me, I'd love to be able to talk about it. And you may not agree with us in the end, but I want you to know how we got there, and that's real important.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, sir. Take care of yourself, and I'm sure, I know we'll run into each other sooner rather than later. Just depends on where our travels take us, but enjoy the tournament, and we'll see you at least in Salem.
All right, man. Thank you very much.
Take care. Jeff Burns joining us here on the Hoopsville Skype. Going to take a quick break. Pat and I come back and wrap things up. You're listening to Hoopsville, presented by D3Hoops.com, National Association of Basketball Coaches, and, of course, the viewers like you. We'll be back with more Hoopsville right after this.
I used to never really talk. Ever. I was scared and shy. It was hard to look at people's faces. I was afraid if I said something wrong, everyone would laugh at me. But then I started to play golf with Special Olympics. I made friends and won lots of gold medals. But I learned more than just playing golf. Special Olympics helped me to find my voice. And now everyone else is speechless.
We've got more schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's 800 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over a decade. From Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the University of New England, and from Hope to Calvin. Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do. We're at D3Hoops.com at www.d3hoops.com.
Division III allows you to be able to give yourself to other things. Not even just participate in them, but really get involved with them if you want to.
There's a lot of interaction. It's not just sitting back, taking notes. You're actually doing hands-on things and better preparing yourself for your major.
Choosing a Division III school, I've had the opportunity to develop my leadership skills and to be more involved on campus.
Division III in athletics, affords students the opportunity not only to participate in intercollegiate athletics at a competitive level, but also gives them the opportunity to, engage in the other interests in their campus and in their lives outside of that sport and outside of the academics on the campus.
And to have opportunity to have time to join clubs and being able to play basketball, it allows you to just be able to do everything you want to do. I wouldn't change it for the world.
We've got more schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's 800 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over a decade. From Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the University of New England, and from Hope to Calvin. Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do. We're at D3Hoops.com at www.d3hoops.com.
I know sports is important, but having the academic part along with it is a big plus.
I've discovered in myself, a newfound ability to overcome adversity at all different angles.
At a Division III school is really shaped around you developing yourself as a complete individual. The end result in my mind is you just become a very well-rounded person.
Before I came into college, I didn't really think I'd be able to balance so much. It helps a lot that you have a family with your team that can guide you.
With a D3 school, there's a lot of time for other opportunities. The coaches expect a lot of you during soccer, but after soccer, that's your own personal time to really find out who you are and other opportunities that you can pursue.
By balancing all of my interests, basketball, my leadership skills, and academics, I'm able to better prioritize my life and to manage it.
College basketball lives in Kansas City at the College Basketball Experience at Sprint Center. The College Basketball Experience is the place to get your game on. It's not a museum, it's an experience you won't forget. Discover the history of the game in the National Collegiate Basketball Hall of Fame, featuring the Gallery of Honor, Mentor Circle, and Honor Theater. Suit up in the latest CBE logoed Nike gear at the CBE Hoop Shop. Elevate your game today and visit the house that college basketball built. College basketball lives in Kansas City at the College Basketball Experience at Sprint Center. The College Basketball Experience is the place to get your game on. It's not a museum, it's an experience you won't forget. Discover the history of the game in the National Collegiate Basketball Hall of Fame, featuring the Gallery of Honor, Mentor Circle, and Honor Theater. Suit up in the latest CBE logoed Nike gear at the CBE Hoop Shop. Elevate your game today and visit the house that college basketball built.
We've got more schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's 800 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over a decade. From Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the University of New England, and from Hope to Calvin. Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do. We're at d3hoops.com at www.d3hoops.com.
I know sports is important, but having the academic part along with it is a big plus.
I've discovered in myself, a newfound ability to overcome adversity at all different angles.
At a Division III school is really shaped around you developing yourself as a complete individual. The end result in my mind is you just become a very well-rounded person.
Before I came into college, I didn't really think I'd be able to balance so much. It helps a lot that you have a family with your team that can guide you.
With a D3 school, there's a lot of time for other opportunities. The coaches expect a lot of you during soccer, but after soccer, that's your own personal time to really find out who you are and other opportunities that you can pursue.
By balancing all of my interests, basketball, my leadership skills, and academics, I'm able to better prioritize my life and to manage it.
And welcome back to Hoopsville, everybody. Took a little bit of a prolonged break. You would think I would have gotten up from my chair to do something in that prolonged break, but I didn't. I've still been sitting here suited up on Hoopsville. I will get up eventually. I've had a bite to eat next to me that I've been nibbling on all day, but eventually we're going to have to eat and drink. But we like answering your questions as well, so we're still plugging away at that. But I'm probably going to tap into an IV at some point later tonight. If you got any questions for us, tweet us at D3Hoops or hashtag Hoopsville. Email us hoopsville at d3hoops.com. Join us on Facebook at facebook.com/Hoopsville. Got an email as I bring Pat Coleman in that I knew was coming. I just hadn't seen it yet. It is the Albertus question. How did Albertus not get a home bid with their record and rankings? Well, let's start for the first thing, and the rankings means nothing. They're referring to the top 25. Second of all, the record is something, but unfortunately the SOS being around a 475 had them regionally ranked pretty low, and Pat, that's part of the equation. The other equation is they don't have the facilities technically to pull this off. That being said, Babson has had to get creative as well.
Dave, this is another one of those questions that I would advocate us just not even answering on the air. The fact is, the regional rankings that the NCAA uses are not necessarily using the same criteria that we do, and that's just the way it is. I think that we do a good job of telling you who's going to win in the NCAA tournament, and the regional rankings tell you a good job of who's going to play where. And that's almost all that needs to be said. And for Albertus, the added bonus of the fact that they can't put 4 teams in that gymnasium if there's ever an opportunity for them to play a Thursday game and then go play a team that had a bye. That's the best /only scenario for Albertus to host in this current structure.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it just didn't happen. I know that we get that question. I just hadn't had it yet, so I figured it was worth at least one dive into it.
I liked the bracket that Ryan Scott and I set up last night. We had Albertus Magnus. I'm pretty sure I can do this from memory. Against Calvin at St. John Fisher. And then one more Catholic school, I think, was Regis of Massachusetts. I think that was our fourth team. We had 3 Catholic schools and a I'm gonna just show right now that I don't remember my comparative religion courses and I'm not gonna misstate what Calvin is. I don't want to do that. Something post-Reformation, and I'm out after that. But that was the one thing that I thought was that I didn't see as much of in this bracket from the men's is there were some opportunities for some great irony matchups, and I've long thought that irony is a criteria when it comes to matching teams up, and I didn't unless I'm missing something. Maybe there's some great ironies here I haven't gotten to. I'm not sure we have as much of that. There was certainly opportunity, but the thing is that you can be creative and you can swap teams around. And does it matter if Calvin is at where were they, at the Mount Union pod or the Marietta pod? Mm-hmm. They're at the Mount Union pod.
Mount Union.
I mean, it's a shorter trip. They're capable of going to St. John Fisher. I think maybe they might have had to go through Canada to do it, but the NCAA software says you can go. So I think you should go. That was my take on that.
Question in Augustana got a bye. How many other teams will Augustana host in the first round? This is just a logistical question. Can Augie potentially host every round if they continue to win till Final Four? They will just host the Saturday game, so they'll just take on the winner of WashU versus DePaul on Saturday. No technical first round hosting for Augustana. Though I will tell you this much: when we talk about changes to the bracketing and the announcements and cost saving measures in Division III. One of the things they've discussed is having a 3-day grace period between announcements and the first game. Right now, Monday to Thursday is not in that grace period because they don't want a team to send, and basically it'd have to be an announcement on Sunday for you to play on Thursday, or even, to be honest, to travel, they're going to be heading out Wednesday, so that still doesn't work. So let's say we ratchet this and move the bye game to Friday. The one idea there would be that the bye team would host that game, but doesn't happen now. I just wanted to take advantage of that opportunity to say that could be coming in our future. As for Augie hosting every round, if they continue to go all the way to the Final Four, it's going to come down to 2 things. One, how do St. Thomas and Augie compare numbers-wise if they're both in the running? And are they even on the same bracket? I'm starting to answer that.
No, they're not
without...
on the same side.
Okay, so never mind. No. So it's going to come down to, I think Augie on their side is probably the stronger candidate out of Mount Union. Whitewater, we already know that answer because they've been regionally ranked ahead of Whitewater anyway, and Marietta. Now, the only trick will be is if there is a curveball and some upset in there, let's say Oswego State, and it happened last year.
I'd say even this, Dave, I think the way the map is set up for this is if those Ohio teams advance, they can get to Whitewater, but I don't think they can get to Augustana. So it might be a case where Whitewater's the central location and gets to host rather than Augustana. Frankly, if I'm an Augustana fan, this is not set up really well for Augustana. You're going to be a team that's coming off of a bye. Teams in the past.
Mount Union cannot get to Augustana.
Right. Yeah. So, but bye teams have generally not looked great on Saturday. They've often won those games, but they haven't always looked good doing it. Augustana is, especially if WashU wins on Thursday and then makes a relatively short trip to Augustana. Augustana is in trouble. That's a situation I would not want to be Augustana. This first round bye does not help Augustana. Way back years ago when you had the old open with quotes from some of our 2005 shows or something, you want to play that first round game. Yeah, exactly. Because you got to have, you want to have your feet underneath you a little bit. It's not like Augustana is not necessarily tournament tested as a program, but these are guys, if I'm remembering correctly, the guys who made that run in 2011, obviously they're definitely gone. This was a relatively younger squad coming into the season, but guys who would all return to starters. But you want to. I think they would have rather had I think, a first-round game against somebody that they're expected to drill, basically,
Mhm.
rather than a first-round bye. I don't think the first-round bye helps Augustana here at all.
And we should point out, having looked at the mileage, Marietta's over 600, Mount Union is 550. So, yeah, this would conceivably go to Whitewater.
Yeah.
And, again, another curveball in there. So there's a good chance Augustana is not hosting next weekend, barring there's some upset that allows it to happen. But I don't see anything off the top of my head since there's so many Ohio schools in there. So Augustana may get the first-round bye
Dave,
and then not host.
Let me throw you something real drama curveball-y here. Mount Union's not the strongest number 1 seed in the land, right? Or number 1 regionally ranked team in the land.
Yeah.
What if Calvin beats them? Calvin beats Oswego. Calvin beats them. Calvin's a fairly central location with a nice gymnasium, and the men have the priority to host in the second weekend.
That would give the excuse to send the women on the road and not give them the chance to go through. Interesting.
Exactly. You'd have, and the women's committee would have an out also. It's
Yep, they'd have
the
an
men's
easy out.
committee wanted to put Calvin there, and they needed to because it was central location.
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah, good point.
Totally happen.
Absolutely, good point.
Oh, the drama.
If you've got any questions, make sure you tweet us at D3Hoopsville, hashtag Hoopsville, email us, hoopsville@d3hoops.com, or join us on Facebook, facebook.com/Hoopsville. What was the other question I had? I had a whole bunch of them on my email that I'd called up, and, of course, just now getting around to them. Do you guys speak on Albertus? Just curious your thoughts of where they landed in general. I like where they landed, to be honest with you. I think that's a great game for Albertus Magnus to maybe kind of show who they are. We've talked about their season last year. They beat, correct me if I'm wrong, Pat, WPI in the first round?
It was WPI and Purchase in some order, yeah.
Yep, WPI, well, Purchase was the host. So it was WPI in the first round and Purchase in the second, then ran into a buzzsaw that was Williams. I like that game against Springfield. I like the fact that they're going to be down at Dickinson with a chance of playing at Dickinson, unless Regis pulls off an upset there. I think that's a terrific road for Albertus. On the other side, they've got most likely William Patterson and or Virginia Wesley and John Carroll coming out of there. I think that's a good tester for Albertus Magnus before they potentially, let's say they kept on winning, potentially would run into Randolph-Macon with a chance to go to Salem. I'm not saying that that's easy. It's not hard. I think it's a good test. I kind of like it.
Yeah, I think this is a fairly evenly matched game. If we were looking at the mock Northeast rankings that we put together last night, these are basically the teams that are 6th and 7th in the Northeast region. So if you're Albertus Magnus, you've got an opportunity to play a team that's slightly ahead of you, a team that the NCAA thinks should beat you on a neutral floor, hundreds of miles from home. I think that's a good opportunity for Albertus. You don't want to play them on a floor in New England necessarily, where the fans might get into it. This is going to be as antiseptic a game as you can get, basically. I don't know how many fans come down from New Haven to Carlisle, Pennsylvania, or how many fans come down from Springfield, Mass. I suspect it'll be a fairly sedate crowd of Dickinson people waiting for the second game. So I think this is a really good opportunity for Albertus. The NCAA committee obviously looks at the numbers, doesn't like the numbers that Albertus has put up. The top 25 poll looks at what Albertus did last year, let's be honest with you, right? And they continue to float and float and float and float, so that they've gotten into the top 10. And I don't know where they'll end up in this afternoon's poll, but we'll find that out in a couple hours. But I really think that this is an opportunity that Albertus really needs to take advantage of, because while our pollsters think that Albertus is pretty good, the numbers don't necessarily show it. So this is your time to, put your money where your mouth is and go win that game if you're Albertus.
Got a great question from our friend on the post boards. Old Knight says, given the challenges you've experienced in keeping our rational top 25 ballot this season, wouldn't it be unsurprising if you got a Final Four that included one team who wasn't listed in the last poll or even shut out of the receiving categories? Honestly, we actually saw that back in 2013. Mary Hardin Baylor, I don't even know if they were getting votes.
I don't think they had any votes.
No, they're in the final ballot. So, and that was taking advantage of a crazy situation where they only had to play once a week. Granted, they had to travel, but they took advantage of it. Absolutely. I think there easily could be a dark horse coming out of the men's bracket to get to Salem. And I think a dark horse could even be a ranked top 25 team that just nobody really is putting a lot of stock in. I've said that I probably have been saying that 2/3 of this season, that Salem could have one or two teams you just did not see coming. and who are just as good as everybody else, but because it's so hard to pin down who really are the top 25 teams in the country, absolutely. I'm not going to be surprised by upsets this year in any way. Could DePaul beat WashU? Of course they could. Could Oswego beat Calvin? You never know. There's always
yes, of course.
There's always that chance of it. Listen, there's some games I think would, maybe would blow my mind if on the women's side if Pine Manor beat Tufts, that was the question I forgot to ask, by the way. But moving on. But could Wesleyan beat Skidmore? Yeah. Did you see what Wesleyan did just to get in the NESCAC tournament and then go win the darn thing?
Oh, yeah, Wesleyan's favored against Skidmore.
Well, I'm just saying. I'm just picking a game. Could they then go on and beat Hopkins? Well, they just beat Amherst. Of course they could. So,
move down one line. Could Endicott beat Stockton?
Whew.
Sure, absolutely.
I don't see any reason those games aren't up in the air, and that's why I said I think this year maybe there's less cognization about second-round games because, geez, name me somewhere where you don't see a tough second-round game. Name me a place where you couldn't. Dickinson Regis maybe doesn't jump out of you as a tough first-round game, but whoever Dickinson plays in the next game is probably going to be tough. It's going to be hard this year not to find a ton of second-round tough games that I think we aren't hearing a lot of people complain that WashU's playing Augustana because, well, someone had to play WashU and someone had to play Augustana, and everyone's good this year. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. On a related note, we just got a question via Twitter. Did we say who the pod of death was this year? I mean, obviously there's a lot of deadly pods.
It's a tournament of death.
Well, I mean, it's a tournament of extreme duress. How about that?
There you go. No, I said that
where everybody should be ranked between 10 and 28 or so, and maybe nobody in the top 10. But I guess if you had to pick a foursome or a threesome, I think it's that Augustana WashU DePaul
probably
tripling trio there.
Yeah, but even
because they worked really hard to avoid it, and we worked really hard to avoid it too. So clearly they know the same things that we do. The ranking, the D3Hoops.com top 25 ranking on that potential second round game is going to be ugly. That's not that's not something that we would normally like to see, but this year just kind of dictates craziness.
And again, you got that St. Thomas versus St. Norbert potential second round of a top 10 matchup. But listen,
that's right.
I've said
the committee again feels differently than we do.
Well, but they also are aware of it and realize that honestly, it's St. Thomas not being able to host kind of changes the bracket in some senses. St. Norbert could have gone somewhere else, but they needed someone to host, and so they have St. Norbert hosting. And that automatically means St. Thomas has to go somewhere. Well, St. Thomas is either going to go to Augustana, they're going to go to Whitewater, or they're going to go to St. Norbert. You pick your poison. It's unavoidable. So that's why I call it the tournament. The entire tournament is going to be a challenge this year. The entire tournament is going to be crazy. That's why I don't necessarily pick a pod, as it were.
I think the entire tournament is going to be awesome this year.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. By the way, I got another question I meant to ask. It goes, over under on total substitutions between Catholic and Alvernia. How do you see that game? First off, you've got the two teams who do not sub.
Isn't it the under?
Yeah.
It's the under, right?
I mean, Catholic basically uses 2 subs, and Alvernia uses 1 sub.
Well, and Dave, media timeouts.
Yeah, which is just going to shorten the bench even.
Yeah, they're just going to play those 6 guys and those 7 guys. I mean,
why not? It's going to be 13 guys total.
It's going to be a stat crew
short
joy
page.
Party.
Yeah, a little short little page.
It's like they should have Ted Schultz, the SID at Grinnell, come and stat this game so he can sleep through a game.
There you go. I mean, both these two teams I've seen in person. Alvernia is hotter than hot right now. They are a very well coached team. I think maybe Mike Miller is underappreciated for how good he is. He has certainly gotten this team to gel. They knew they were going to have moving parts. If you heard my interview last night with him, he knew he was going to have to put guys in new positions. They have impressed me. I said a couple weeks ago they were heating up yet again, and that's dangerous in that conference. Where on the other side of Catholic, I saw Catholic a couple weeks ago playing certainly better than I saw them at the Hoopsville Classic. However, those 2 losses to Scranton gives me pause and some concern. I would argue that you don't want to lose the hot hand, and Alvernia's got the hot hand right now. Catholic just lost a home game. Not sure there's any any aura there that you need to be worried about. Alvernia clearly doesn't care about going on the road either. No,
but a good wake-up call for Catholic. I mean,
you would have thought that would have happened
listening,
though the week before.
Yeah, I mean Scranton.
Well, granted, it was at Scranton. There's a difference.
Yeah, exactly. And the Scranton Catholic thing is, Scranton has kind of had Catholic's number in this conference, and dating back before when they played each other as kind of Mid-Atlantic Catholic regional rivals. Scranton did very well against Catholic, so.
I don't know. I don't know who's going to win this one. It's a fascinating matchup, that's for sure.
And Catholic's not going to take anybody lightly. That's what I was getting at. No.
Absolutely not.
Even though, they at one point were whatever, really good, right? 22 and 21 and 3.
21 and 3. 21 and 3. Yep.
Yeah. Yep.
No, and Alvernia has been on a tear. I mean, absolutely been on a tear through the MAC Commonwealth. I said it before. Lycoming did not want to see them in the semifinals. Stevenson certainly looked good in the first half. Didn't come out of the locker room in the second half, and Alvernia won 41-18, but that's also a part of Alvernia just not giving up. Down 17, down 16, going whatever. That's just the kind of team. That's going to be a fascinating game, but you're right. There are not going to be a lot of subs. The PA announcer is going to have kind of a boring job, just calling fouls and scores in that one.
You won't hear a lot of horn, so that's good.
Yeah, that's true. You will not hear a lot of horn. Game might move a little faster as a result. Anything else on this men's bracket, Pat, that jumps out that you're like, God, if I could fly to that or get to that'd be where I'm headed?
Oh, well, I haven't
looked at a lot of them.
I haven't looked at that because I can't fly this weekend. So
no, I just mean if you could.
But I hear you. I would like to be at the Mount Union bracket. I think I think it's kind of balanced. Newman might not necessarily stack up to Mount Union, but it's not like Mount Union has a ton of postseason experience. This is going to be new for them in the sport of men's basketball anyway. And, it'll be kind of cool. It would be cool to go to Mount Union to see something other than a football game. And I kind of know how to get to Mount Union. The thing that was kind of rattling around in my mind, Dave, is there somebody out there, and I know we can't really predict something like this, but knowing what Morrisville State did the last 2 years and just blew everybody's minds is I wonder if there's somebody out there who can do that in this year's bracket, who's just going to come from straight out of nowhere and take stuff by storm. Because man, the Morrisville State run the last 2 years is still to me mind-boggling.
Yeah, and I almost wonder if this is the year that kind of team can get to Salem, and that's what I mean by the dark horse.
Yeah.
If I were to
Alvernia.
Yeah. No, good. Yeah.
It's not like Alvernia's never done it.
No, and Salisbury kind of sneaks up on me. They've been playing really good basketball, and St. Mary's and Christopher Newport been stealing the headlines. Marymount was stealing. Salisbury down that lower corner. They're going to have to get through Eastern Connecticut, but I don't think that's a matchup that Salisbury doesn't like. And then Trinity, but they could get on a roll at that point in time. Maybe they're the kind of team in there. I'm just kind of glancing at things as I go through my bracket and see if I can pick out another one that's really a dark horse like that.
Albertus Magnus isn't a dark horse by the top 25.
That's what I was going to say. They could make a run. Yeah, they could make a run, but I wouldn't put them in the dark horse category.
Right. I don't know anything about Texas Lutheran.
Yeah,
that's a whole bunch of untested teams in that pod.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Whoever comes out of that is going to have to take on St. Norbert or St. Thomas. And maybe St. Norbert makes that run finally that we've been waiting for. Do you call it a dark horse? Yeah. Maybe because we haven't seen them make the run, but maybe they can make that run.
Well, and it's interesting. I saw that St. Norbert team play last year. They were 5 seniors and Andrew Schwer, if I remember correctly, and really not expecting a whole ton out of them this year. And they haven't. The Midwest Conference hasn't provided them much of a challenge. They played John Carroll really well, but that's their one loss. I don't know if we're right or if the committee's right on St. Norbert. And this process might not tell us. Elmhurst is a good matchup. It'll tell us a little bit about where they stand in the Midwest region. But St. Thomas could just be really good, and we'd never, we wouldn't know. We wouldn't get an indication out of that if St. Thomas plays St. Norbert and beats them in a relatively close game. We'll never know how good St. Norbert was.
Yeah, no, agreed. Absolutely. And so that's why I'm fascinated with this bracket this year. I remember when I first got it this morning, Pat, And my first reaction was like, huh, I got nothing. This,
You're looking for questions to ask, right?
I'm like, great, I got a conference call in 15 minutes and I've got nothing. I mean, obviously Wash U, that little trio up there was jumped out at me. And as you went through it, I almost felt like it was Top Chef. At the end of the season, you got all these great chefs who are doing terrific work, and nobody cooked a bad meal, but you still have to eliminate somebody. So now you're nitpicking. And I felt like I was almost getting to the point, looking through the bracket going, I got to find something. There's got to be something I can ask them about. What is it? Where is it? Oh, let me ask them about, okay, I'm going to ask them about Whitworth and Claremont Mud Scripts. That sounds good. Yeah, let's ask them about that. I mean, but in reality, we knew they were both going somewhere. We just thought Whitworth to Emory made some a little more sense. But, to Texas. But in reality, it's the same scenario. Both low-ranked, regionally ranked teams heading out to another pod. So I can't, I don't have anything there necessarily. Worcester going to Marietta, not going somewhere else. Okay,
I mean, that's
probably going to be more creative, but the team I had them going to was Randolph-Macon, and they've got the bye. Okay.
Yeah.
Could they have gone somewhere else? Sure, but it's still going to be one of those where like, well, why did they send them to there? That's too tough. Well,
the only thing, Dave, is that might be a split session pod. Marietta could sell out that gym by itself, and Worcester could sell
it out by themselves. You're right.
Because
and maybe
Marietta
that's a good.
Marietta looks like it's a great atmosphere. I haven't been there. I've watched it on video quite a few times, but I suspect they only seat like 1,300 to 1,400 people legitimately. So Worcester would definitely travel that many. It's not that far a trip.
And at one point I was sitting there going, geez, I mean, why is Mount Union's pod up there and Marietta's at the bottom? But then, really, you could flip it the other way and you still be like, oh, geez, that means Worcester could run into Augustana or, so either way, I mean, again, I felt like I was nitpicking, only to look for something to ask. Nothing, and even on the women's side, nothing jumps out at me that's just glaringly. I think we had a couple things last year in the men's side that were glaring. This year, I don't see any glaring things. And I think the committee, and having talked to the committee quite a bit since last year, I think they realized that they had done some things last year in the brackets that in hindsight, they would admit they didn't love. And they really took the time in the 12 months since to say, how can we do it better? And I kind of like what Jeff Burns has done, taking the idea of starting the process far sooner, even if it's not a true bracket. They start getting into the habit of bracketing. We got a little bit of that with Mike DeWitt in the sense of at large selections. Mike got that ball rolling a little bit of how do we kind of mock select, and they certainly did some bracketing, but the idea of, okay, who are our 16 teams right now that we would have host? Okay, good. The next week, has any of that changed? Okay, we've got that, good. And then starting that process earlier in the day, starting that process earlier in the weeks ahead, I think it led them to think it through more, and not be at the table in the last hours going, oh, geez, I never thought of this. Well, clearly they thought of it. They went and threw some scenarios. You threw the curveball, like what Wesleyan winning on Sunday afternoon. How much did that kill you? And Jeff's kind of like, well, we kind of had plan A and we had plan B. And you know what? They probably did. Now, I will say that the ODAC helped them, having Virginia Wesleyan and Randolph-Macon playing in a championship game without an extra curveball coming in from somebody else. That certainly helped them in that capacity. And that's, by the way, where some of these things are going to have to change. If this 3-day window gets put into place, there's a lot of talk about how those conference tournaments are going to probably have to get forced back. And things like Salem would have to change, but that's down the road. But so, I kind of liked what I heard there, and I think Dave Martin and his crew were doing something along the same lines, maybe not exact, but how about Jeff Burns talking about the fact that those two committees are talking to each other? Okay, how do you deal with this, and how do you deal with that? And granted, the SOS numbers are different. They're based on difference, but they still have the same dilemma of how to base them off of win-loss percentages. So, I thought this was a fascinating year, maybe a bellwether year, Pat. Maybe this is we had a couple over the years. When Dave Martin was on the crew, on the men's side, we had the bracket of death that one year. That seemed to be a bellwether. The next year, a lot of differences. Very open, too, by the way. Very much, and not that everybody doesn't answer questions and has for a long time, but the men really took the onus of answering questions, and we kind of had the opposite happen with the women. Well, now they've had kind of their bellwether moment as well and said, you know what, we need to do things differently. And so, you get those every couple of years, and it's good to see. I think we're heading in the right direction. The problem is the committees always change, and so you're kind of having to test the waters, could put your finger in the water, go, okay, what's their temperature today? How are they gauging this? And we'll see what the future holds. But I think they're at least Jeff Burns on the men's side is leaving an interesting set of doing things, and I'm hoping it continues. And on the women's side, Dave Martin should be there. We hope another 2 years. Who knows if he recuses himself to allow somebody else to be chair at some point, which is what Steve Ulrich, by the way, did. Steve Ulrich recused himself to let Jeff Burns be chair, is kind of a nod to Jeff for his 4 years on the committee. Steve is still there, in case anyone's curious.
Well, I think of the many, many things that you've just said, I was going to pick out the thing about conference title games on Sundays. For example, remember, because you just mentioned Steve Ulrich. Remember, the Centennial Conference used to play its title games on Sundays, and I really think that there was a few years ago where a Centennial Conference team might have gotten slighted because something happened late on a Sunday, and the committee didn't fully have time to recover and think it through correctly. I really do think that it would be nice if we could get these games back into Saturday and leave Sunday for Selection Sunday. I don't know how feasible that is. I get that, we want to avoid taking kids out of class and that sort of thing. And I would love to see more teams in conference tournaments. I know that's not probably not the majority view. I think a lot of people are pretty happy to see just, the top half of the conference or 4 teams or whatever it is get into the conference tournaments. But we had 3-6 seeds win men's conference tournaments and we had an 8-1 and things that just don't happen anymore because those teams aren't in tournaments. We went back to a day in, I think it was 2001 or 2002, where the entire Wisconsin Intercollegiate Athletic Conference men's tournament went upside down. 8 beat 1, 7 beat 2, 6 beat 3, and I think 8 beat 1, Stout beat Whitewater, or Whitewater beat Stout. I don't even remember. 8 beat 1 by 40. I mean, it's just these are the things. This is what's fun about February and March, and I still like to let kids have those games. We only let kids play 25 games. Thankfully, it's still 25. But we ought to give the conference tournament experience to more teams too, I think.
Well, and I will throw the curveball that if they do have to move those tournaments back, for example, let's look at the ODAC. There's just no way they can have everybody participate. Yeah. Right now, the men started this year. It alternates, but the men were Thursday, Saturday, Sunday with the early game Sunday. Women were Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That alternates because last year it was the other way around. You're not moving that to Wednesday with first-round games. I mean, this year they were playing Sunday games because of weather, and teams on Sunday then had to play Monday for first round. So if you're going to move it back onto Saturday, now you are going to be talking about restricting in the ODAC, and you're going to have to maybe talk about just the top 8, and those first quarters are going to be on campus.
I do realize that the two things that I just advocated for are somewhat contradict each other. So if we could get one of them, that'd be awesome.
Absolutely. So, certainly time will tell on that. I want to remind everybody to be on the air with Hoopsville on Thursday, 7 o'clock.
Not tomorrow?
No.
Do we do another Hoopsville tomorrow?
No.
Do we have one? Don't we have a Hoopsville at 7 tonight?
I'm going on strike. No, we're not doing one at 7 tonight either. I'm going on strike.
I think you're in a right-to-work state, man. I don't think you can go on strike.
Dang. It was worth the effort. No, we'll be on the air at 7 o'clock Eastern time on Thursday, and of course be on the air Sunday. Weather, Jeff brought it up. I kind of known it was coming, but I didn't even put 2 and 2 together just yet and had time. Weather could be a major factor in play here. And
if it does, I'll know. My day job is dealing with travel management and travelers, so I get that. I'll find out pretty soon.
So it'll certainly be interesting to see how that all plays out.
What we should do, actually, and I'm serious about this, is go find out Whitworth's travel plans and find out who else is flying. Right? Claremont Mudscript's travel plans, just to see if we can get ahead of that.
Abingdon in the opposite direction.
Yep, but it's probably easier to get out of the East Coast.
It may be.
To get to.
Yep, it very well may be. Absolutely.
Hey, Dave, I've got one final thought.
Go for it.
The story of last night. The reason why we were able to do 19 out of 19 correctly, it's this right here.
Mm-hmm.
Good job gleaning last night, sir.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well done. You've cultivated some good sources. That's the word I was looking for.
Thank you. Yeah, it helps. Every once in a while, they'll probably all be gone by next year.
Yeah, probably. But,
No. They, I sometimes don't know whether to call on them or not. A couple of them presented themselves, and we went with it. So, no.
They were apparently correct.
Unfortunately, that's why we'd love to have that data. And trust me, the men's and women's, or at least the men's, I'm pretty sure the women's basketball committees would love to give it to us as well. But that is for another topic of conversation we've had many times. We don't need to rehash now. But it certainly helped us, because I think it avoided us from having at least one team I know in the tournament, maybe two.
Maybe.
One from the East, one from the West that probably would have been in there.
I mean, in the end, when we went and dug into NYU.
No, agreed. Yep.
I think we might have eliminated them anyway, because at 8-6 in your conference, unless you're playing, in the ACC.
Yeah, right.
That's not going to happen. That's not going to get you in.
I think you can have a losing record in the ACC and get into the
well, as a
Division I
D3 school,
tournament.
you can.
Yeah, that's true. I think we'll wrap it up there. I don't see any other questions flowing in. Any other final thoughts, sir, before we let you go?
Nope. Glad you stayed suited up, sir. I think we should do this all the time.
No, let's.
No. But clearly, I need to work on my backdrop back here. I prettied it up a little bit since yesterday.
I like it.
I got a long way to go. Yeah, I've got a 2006 something
I
going
noticed
over
the
my
logo.
shoulder here. And let's see what else. I have a D3Hoops.com Classic All Tournament Award back there.
Nice.
And a basketball broadcast banner from 1996. I don't know if you can see that. That's this this poster that was hung up around campus when I was doing local radio, and then 1998 Final Four poster back there.
Very cool. Well,
my number 22 WashU jersey is getting framed.
We will frame our Ohio Wesleyan one in due time. Just have not gotten around.
Use
to
Michael's.
That's one of the options we do have.
My wife would be happy if you used Michael's.
Hint, hint. That is one that my wife actually mentioned. Does D3 take into consider strength of schedule? I'm going to leave that one to Twitter. Leaving that one to Twitter.
Some people can't be helped, man.
No, I'm going to leave that one to Twitter.
We do take into account strength of schedule. Thanks for asking.
Very much so. At some point, it does not, but it does most of the way. Anyway, Pat, thanks so much for joining me in the last 24 hours, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Pat Coleman joining us via Skype here on Hoopsville. Appreciate him taking the time to do that, especially over the last 2 days. Had a lot of fun, and I hope you enjoyed the brackets being announced, and hopefully your team is dancing. If you're not, enjoy the tournament nonetheless, because the tournament's going to be a lot of fun. A lot of more schools will broadcast games these days, which certainly makes it more exciting for everybody. So if you don't get a chance to go to a gym to take in a game, you can watch it online. Most schools do it. If they don't, they're calling on those of us like us to help with that, and we will do so if we can. So go make sure you log on to d3hoops.com for everything. We'll have plenty of further information, bracket breakdowns, as it were. Pat Coleman and Gordon Mann, even myself, will dive into who our sleepers might be, who our favorites might be, who might be the most prone to an upset, and all the brackets, kind of give you an idea. Of course, all our regional writers and national writers are tackling the great stories. They'll be taking place throughout the week leading into those games, starting on Thursday with 2 games on the men's side and Friday for everybody else. So plenty of material there worth reading. Of course, don't forget about D3 boards. If you just want to chat about your team or talk about matchups, there's the d3boards.com you can go to as well and get plenty more information, or join the conversation as well. We'll be on the air Thursday, 7 o'clock with our normally scheduled show. We'll have plenty of guests. We'll also be back on the air Sunday as well at 7 o'clock with more guests. Where am I headed this weekend? I do not know. Got to weigh a few options and also figure out what my regular work schedule will allow me to do. We will figure that out in due time. That should do it. Don't forget, you can always follow us on Twitter at D3Hoopsville or hashtag Hoopsville. You can also follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Hoopsville. And if you ever have questions, you can email us Hoopsville at D3Hoops.com. That's going to do it for us. Really appreciate you all tuning in and enjoying the shows with us. And we'll see you back here on Thursday. Also want to formally thank everybody. On Thursday, we'll probably rattle off the list, but I want to thank everybody who supported us on the Hoopsville fundraising project. Reached our goal, and we certainly appreciate everybody who did that. I know some of you want to still donate to the cause, and we certainly appreciate that. Contact us via Twitter or email, really via email, and we can tell you about how you can still help us cover Division III the way it deserves to be covered. I want to thank Nancy Fay and Becky Martin for coming on the show today, and I want to thank their sports information directors for assisting with that as well, Chris Mitchell and Luke Stilson. That's going to do it for us, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate it. We'll get this archive available for you in case you miss anything, including the podcast. And outside of that, thanks for tuning in. You've been listening to Hoopsville, presented by D3Hoops.com, National Association of Basketball Coaches, and, of course, viewers like yourselves. Thank you for your support. Hope you enjoyed the programming. We'll see you back here Thursday evening at 7 o'clock. Good night, everybody.